Tá craobhna here in an eis an Gaillimh. People of Galway, we love you.
I don't want to leave the people of Waterford down, you know, because they're my life, you know. People of Waterford are my life, you know, and I love me county, you know.
We love John Bennett.
It's almost like they're afraid to kind of go and hurl and just let themselves express themselves. It's like as if they're nearly afraid to make a mistake, and sometimes you have to make a mistake and just throw off that bit of nervousness and have a go.
Yeah, it's pure constipated hurling.
Welcome along to episode 10 of the Hurling Pod. Lots to unpack from last weekend. We had probably the game of 2022 so far, with Limerick, despite their injury concerns, overcoming the league champions Waterford by 30 points to 2 goals and 21. It means Limerick have got 1 foot effectively into the Munster Championship final, but things were blown wide open by Clare coming out of the long grass and getting a rare victory for them at Skehill Stadium. They'll be back there this week after their win against Tipperary to play against Cork, and should the Banner, who've now got a reinforced panel for the Championship, win that game, they'll be very much in contention to qualify for the Munster final. In Leinster, huge result for Dublin on the road against Wexford. Wexford now face an uphill task to qualify after they were edged out by a point by the Dubs, who now, if they win against Westmeath this weekend, will be extremely well placed to qualify in Leinster. Delighted to say that we have James Skehill here once again after we flew solo last week and back from his travels, Paul Murphy. Paul, how are you getting on?
Great, Will. How are you? How are you, James? Good to see you.
I'm tremendous, Paul.
Will we get straight into the two of you guys having a little pop back and forth at each other while Paul was off on his trip to Africa as well? James, you had no problem with being called an ape, it would seem.
Wow, what a way to start the show. I didn't shave either. So. Oh, listen to me, Will, Paul. I've been called an ape more times than I care to remember, so... That one, I was thinking you must have got a chip off someone locally, because that's what they call me when I'm acting out a small bit.
I wasn't actually having a pop at you. That was an actual conversation we had, so it's all factual. Like, I mean, I didn't actually think it was going to offend you.
As I said in my WhatsApp to you, Murphy, I said it is a long road with no turns.
I'll be honest with you now. When I was about to send it, I thought for a few seconds I was going, I'm opening a tin of worms here now. But sure, look, it's out there now, so.
Oh, it's out there, yeah.
Made the best man
win. The most public forum in the world, yeah.
Paul, we were talking slightly behind your back last week about the fact that you were lying down on the bed watching, at the time, Limerick against Cork on the iPad. Your poor wife was sitting outside at the time while you were taking the time to watch that. And as it worked out, your safari time changed, and all that hard work to watch all the hurling on that Sunday afternoon went to waste because you couldn't even join us on the podcast last week. How did you get back without getting murdered?
Yeah, look, it didn't go to waste. It was all part of my research now for this week, and at least I was abreast anyway of the ongoings in the hurling world. But no, yeah, look, it just things didn't work out last week to actually, I suppose, weigh in on all the events the week before. But look, it was great. I suppose we hit a lull time during the holiday there. We had a bit of downtime, and just the window opened up, got to see the games, and yeah, look, there was a lot of things to take from it last week. And again, it's amazing in another week now when we see the tables where they are, like how much has changed, and what we were talking about 2 or 3 weeks ago, what we thought would happen. I mean, the examples, the likes of Wexford now, who are in a precarious position, Clare after coming out of the long grass, like you said. So it's amazing over the course of a week, let's say, with the 2 games, or with the 2 weekends, just how the landscape has changed with it.
Well, James, maybe we can talk a little bit back to front when it comes to what's happened in the weekend just gone by. We can maybe start with Clare against Tipperary, because we were talking about Clare's injuries, and there was all this talk that Duggan was back in training. Maybe they might just have Shane O'Donnell to come in and play for the first time in effectively 2 years. He hadn't played a competitive game for over a year. When those two were available, it became a real game changer compared to the panel that Clare were fielding in the league. Like, those two are elite players to be able to bring back in for that Tipperary game.
Yeah, like it's amazing when you introduce 1 or 2 players that how the optics and the whole landscape of a team can change. Like, we were sitting here 7 days ago and we were thinking, geez, we don't know what we're going to get from Clare. We were expecting a bit of energy in performance, but I personally had tipped Tipperary on the back of what they produced down in Waterford, and they just came out of the traps. Clare came out of the traps big time, and they got big performances from their big players. So the likes of like Rory Hayes continued his what I call all-star form. John Conlon was excellent centre back. Peter Duggan and Shane O'Donnell carried the fight up the forwards, and then Tony Kelly was his usual kind of energetic self, and then add in Ian Galvin and Ryan Taylor, and you an all-round performance, like, and they just blew Tipperary off the park. They were extremely impressive, and what I'm looking for now is can they back it up next week.
Yeah, well, one of the things, Paul, that stood out about Shane O'Donnell was once upon a time when he burst onto the scene, that All-Ireland final replay, he was there as a finisher. He was the guy at the forefront, getting the ball, shots at goal. He was able to pull the strings a bit for Clare last weekend. Now, some of his fielding was important when Clare were mixing up their approach into the forward line, and Duggan caught some great ball going in too. But O'Donnell was a great link player for them at Semple Stadium last weekend.
Yeah, look, and I've marked Shane O'Donnell over the years, and I suppose Shane O'Donnell came onto the scene in, I suppose, not in an unusual way, certainly a unique way anyway, scoring 3 goals in an All-Ireland final. But then, I suppose, has to deal with that, not the stigma of that, but people expected goals out of him the whole time. I think something from marking him anyway, he's a really creative player, which we obviously saw over the weekend. We know him more as a finisher, but what he does is he asks a lot of questions. He makes these runs that will ask questions of a defender. So like if he's marking Owen O'Donnell, or if he's marking Ty DeBurka, or whoever, like let's say if he used to be out that little bit further, he doesn't concern himself with the defender too much in terms of he goes and just creates these runs, kind of meandering runs, and pops up in different places, which can be a little bit kind of unnerving for a defender, because he doesn't necessarily hold his position. But again, like we saw him getting assistant for a score where he plucked the ball out of the air. I think he was competing with Ronan Maher for the ball, something we don't normally associate with Shane O'Donnell, but again, that's just what he brings. And I think what he brought this kind of bit of dynamic play to the Clare forward line that they were probably missing. And then likes of Duggan being back as well, it was just this burst of energy. And again, I suppose the other thing, and I think Anthony Daly touched on the Sunday game, was just that what he would bring to the dressing room as well, because so many of those younger players, they're obviously looking at Tony Kelly the last few years, but Clare have been unfortunate with Peter Duggan and these lads being away, and Shane O'Donnell being away and missing a year. Have those lads back, I'm sure, is a huge thing for the Clare dressing room as well. And then when they go out and put in a performance like that, like it's very exciting for the younger players in the dressing room to be part of this. But it was brilliant, definitely, for not only the players but for the Clare supporters to see Shane O'Donnell back and to see him contributing really well. Like it's like he was never away. He was just hurling really well the weekend.
Well, James, that Clare forward line were flying, but the flip side to the story is Tipperary did not defend anywhere near as effectively as they did against Waterford the week previously. And like as a goalkeeper, you would feel some sympathy for Brian Hogan, who made a couple of good saves, and there was just no defender there to actually clear the ball when it came out for the second possession. So Tipperary were a mess at the back.
It's amazing when, put Cathal Barrett aside for a moment, and it's like the 5 backs for Tipperary looked hungover. That's the way they looked, because if you consider, I know from Brian's position, he pulled off 2 tremendous saves. The first one in particular from Peter Duggan was absolute top drawer stuff, and then to produce that kind of quality, and then to get up and find a Clare forward, not one Clare forward but 2 waiting for the rebound that you'd never had a chance to save, must be extremely, extremely frustrating and disappointing. And when you look at the shot from behind the goals and on that camera angle, and you see the Clare on-runners, there's 3-4 Clare guys coming towards the goal, and the Tipp guys were just jogging back. There was no intent to get back and mind the house. There was no real aggression to defend. It was kind of, they nearly accepted what was going to happen. There was kind of an attitude whereby they'd wait and see if we save it, we save it. If a goal goes in, a goal goes in. I was amazed by it, because you wouldn't associate that with Tipp over the years. You'd always look at Pádraig Maher and Ronan Maher, surprisingly, and say that they'll burst their hole to get back to the goal and stop them going in. So it was surprising, but overall it was worrying, because it was an attitude type of thing as well. And but then when Tipp had the ball, I watched them when they were doing the short Pokeouts, and it's like they didn't know what they wanted to do themselves. So that they'd hit the short Pokeout for the sake of hitting the short Pokeout, and then when that happens, it's like the guy who received the ball is on his own and he's trying to make a decision. There was no collective thinking. There was no kind of real set game plan, and it was a very disjointed performance from Tipperary from top to bottom, and riddled with errors. So many errors across the park, which you wouldn't associate with Tipp. And then so surprisingly, when you think 7 days previous or 6 days previous, they produced a great performance against a Waterford team who you could say are close to the level of Limerick, and then they go out and produce that against Clare. I can't draw a rhyme or reason to it, and it's a damaging performance, and they have to get their straight up. They have to get their shit together, or else they're out. And get it together soon.
Yeah, it's not easy when you're going to Limerick in a couple of weeks' time as your next fixture to try and get back into this, because it's a very poor start for Tipperary. They can afford really to drop no other points if they're going to qualify for a Munster final. And the thing about it is, Paul, the Clare defence scored 3 points. There were 3 points in play from the entire Tipperary starting forward line, which is a horrifically poor return, given that actually they were posing Waterford all sorts of problems a week ago. I wonder how much of this comes down to the fact that they emptied the tank against Waterford the week previously and then couldn't get back up to that level again the next weekend.
Yeah, I don't think it's a lot to do with. I mean, it's the early stages of the round robin. I don't think there could be any excuses for fatigue at this stage. I think James hit the nail on the head with one word he said was just attitude. I mean, against Waterford, they seem to be still smarting from the league match down there, and that how much of a beating they took, maybe what people were saying after him. And like, you consider that we were talking about this Waterford team, and still are. We're talking about them as in really the number 2 team in the country. Waterford looked kind of a little bit punch drunk even in the first half the week previous. So like, that's what Tipperary are capable of doing. Waterford didn't even seem to know what they wanted to do with the puck out for the first half. They were really under pressure. You know, Tyke de Burka wasn't really an influence in the game because Noel McGrath was drifting out. So they asked savage questions of him. It's a week later. You know, there's no fatigue involved in this game whatsoever. It's the same for every team. You know, okay, Clare had last week off, fair enough, but it's not a case that you've been week on week for the last while. So it really just comes down to attitude for me. And again, as we were saying there, and as James was saying, is all you have to do is look at when the Clare lads were going through on goal, and 2 of the goals were basically rebounds. Brian Hogan did his best to save them, and what you're looking for there is, at least Brian Hogan can only do a certain amount. I mean, he saved the ball, that's the only thing he can really do. The idea that you want him to save it and then keep it from bouncing out to the Clare forward is ridiculous. That's a back's job. But there was no intent there from the Tipperary backs to get back and actually just, you know, defend the goal, and then even going forward as well. It was like watching a completely different team from watching the Waterford match. And for me, that just completely comes down to attitude. We can't talk about fatigue, we can't talk about injuries and all this. If they were able to do it the week before against Waterford, they're completely able to do it this week against Clare. And look, Clare just hit them. Clare didn't wait to see what Tipperary were going to bring. And again, like, half time, 13 points down. It was just, for me anyway, complete attitude. And there was a few players who tried, you know, even the likes of Carl Barrett and that, they were shown, but there wasn't enough all over the pitch, and just everywhere it just seemed to be symptomatic of the team. Their attitude all over the pitch just wasn't at the level it needed to be.
Feels significant as well, James, the fact that Clare had a very poor record against Tipperary at Semple Stadium, had won there in 2018. They've backed up that win now with a win in 2022. They go back to the same venue this coming week to play against Cork, and it could work out very nicely for them, given that they had that extra week just for the injuries to clear up after the league. They obviously got themselves into a very good place from where they were coming out of the league, even though, like, and this hasn't been smart after the fact, they did hurl very well against Limerick and probably should have beaten them in Ennis. And look, they've got them in the last game of this championship run in Ennis as well. But Clare actually came to the right pitch at championship, and if they go back with a performance similar, particularly to the first half of the weekend, and they beat Cork, this Clare team will have come from 5th favourites to potentially get into the final.
It's ghastly because, like, no one in the country, including ourselves, were talking about Clare 7 days ago. You know, 5 days ago even. You know, we didn't say a word about them because obviously they'd not missed the first round, but you know, they were scheduled not to play in the first round, and now the whole place is talking about them. So it's going to be interesting to see how will they back up their top level performance that they produced last weekend against a Cork team who's still reeling, who's had 2 weeks to think about things, you know. So I am expecting Cork to come out all guns blazing, very, very similar to the way Clare came out against Tipperary, and I'm interested to see how will Clare react to that, because obviously when we spoke about Tipperary, I asked you, did their stock go up? Yes, they did after the Waterford game, and it was like they were surprised by what Clare brought, and that's what sapped some of their energy. They didn't expect that onslaught of energy of just attack and hurling, and it took the energy out of Tipp, and then just things from bad to worse. So I want to see how will Clare react this weekend if Cork come with bundles of energy and bundles of intent coming off the back of a bad performance and hit them with a few things, which is what I expect, to be honest. And will they take the best punch and give a couple back? You know, and I think they will. I think they've good people, really, really good people over them, in the likes of Sean Tracy and Brian Lohan, who bring an awful lot of energy into training. The decibel level will be quite high anyway, that's for sure. So I'd say they'll come out in good form. And you know, if you ask me to call the game right now, I actually can't give you. I can give pros and cons to both teams, but I'm expecting a huge performance from Cork, and I just want to see can Clare take that and override it. Time will tell.
Right, you hold on to those pros and cons, because Paul, you can come in on where Cork are going to be at, because we saw the way they hurled the Porky Queeve, particularly the way they were dominated by Limerick in that second half. Really struggled from about minute 38 onwards till full time. Cork didn't get going whatsoever. People have been talking about, will the defensive system change? You know, they've got issues right down the spine of their defence with the way they defended in that game, and we've highlighted a few times the way they played in the league final and faded out of that game too. What kind of a kick are you expecting out of Cork when they take to the field in Semple this weekend?
Yeah, it's kind of a hard one to call. Like James is saying, like if they were going playing Limerick, I'd be saying, well, like, I mean, your work's cut out for you here. You know exactly what your job is. But they're, to a certain extent, is it fair to say they're playing an unknown quantity in Clare? I think they would have been looking at the Clare matches, you know, before the championship campaign. Not to be unfair to Clare, but that's the one. Okay, we're going to go and win that one. But now they're looking at Clare going, okay, we have Shane O'Donnell back and we have Peter Duggan. Like, something we're talking about with Cork is that really at the defence, do they know what they're about at defence? And that's something we're asking questions of. You know, Coleman at centre back, does he know where he's meant to be playing? That's for me coming from management telling him where he's meant to be playing or what to do in certain situations. Well, he's about to go out and potentially have Tony Kelly roaming around. I think that's what Clare will possibly do, is you're starting centre forward. Now, ask the question, does Coleman follow you, or does Coleman sit back and do they send Tim O'Mahony after him? Well, but Clare can now ask those questions, and never mind ask those questions, they can have Ian Galvin in behind causing serious problem because he's electric, and he can cause problems there for any of the Cork full back line. You have now Shane O'Donnell, who's just going to be making runs, who's just unpredictable in many ways. He'll get the ball into his hand and he'll take on the Cork defence. And you're going to have Peter Duggan, who's just an extremely creative player, a really smart player, a great hurler. So now Clare are in the position to ask savage questions of Cork. What Cork do, it's again another unknown quantity what Cork are going to do. I kind of fancy Cork for this one, just that they'll have enough to come out and actually win it. We saw Limerick overpower them completely in Cork, but Clare obviously don't have that power at the moment to completely overpower them. But they certainly, if they get a run on them, we've seen this Clare team over the last few years that when they have all their players to select from and they get a run on the team, they build savage momentum and it can be very hard to stop. So I think, you know, Cork potentially could start this game very nervy, you know, because they're reeling a small bit from the first match. They're trying to get back into it. They're trying to steady the ship. But I don't think Clare are going to give them that time. I think Clare are going to come at them the way they came at Tipperary and say, look, we're not going to wait to see what Cork are going to bring to this game. We're going to bring our own thing. A week on from where they played and bet Tipperary in the back garden. So there's so many interesting things with this game, but I think it could be a really, really good game because you have Clare who are on the rise now at the moment and who have the sniff of a Munster final, which a lot of people would have said no chance of, but now they have it. And you have Cork who are now, before this championship started, you know, real favourites to get into a Munster final, and they're kind of reeling. So you kind of have two teams at two different situations, and but I still expect Cork to come through. To give Cork the benefit of the doubt, I still think they're really, you know, they do have that quality to come through, but I don't think Clare are going to make it easy for them. And if Clare come out of this with a win over the weekend, I too wouldn't be surprised at that.
James, do you think Cork are going to make any substantial changes then, given that they've had a couple of weeks now to have a think about it? It is difficult to switch things around in Championship, but maybe if they look at the tape and analyse the way they've defended for the last couple of games, they might feel they want to do something different. I know when we get to the listener questions later, we've had 2 or 3 questions in this week saying, surely the idea should be put Coleman slightly further forward, whether that's midfield, centre half forward, maybe move O'Mahony slightly further forward and bring in different players into defence. It seems the Cork public are kind of crying out for changes, but are Kieran Kingston as management team likely to make changes to their defence in the middle of a Championship stream?
I think they've no choice, to be honest. I think they I won't say they were shown up. That's a bit disingenuous, but they certainly their flaws were highlighted badly against Limerick on a couple of occasions. Now, just to listen to Paul talk there about Tony Kelly at 11, and you can be sure they're going to start Tony Kelly at 11 and give him the free rein in the place, go where you want Tony and occupy, let's say, Mark Coleman. I wouldn't be surprised to see a man marking job done Tony Kelly from like a Jerry Miller type person, and Cork playing with 7 defenders playing with a sweeper. You know, we wouldn't associate that with that Cork primarily. We've seen them with kind of a ball retention kind of game plan over the last couple of years, trying to nearly mirror the game plan that Limerick produced. But they have to do something drastic. They cannot allow Tony Kelly to dictate the play and to open up the whole centre channel for Clare to run through. So they're going to have to occupy that channel, get Tony Kelly onto a man marker, and then have someone in the middle. So I think if Mark Coleman doesn't have to, I suppose, worry about Tony Kelly and he's been man marked by others, I think you can see Coleman stay in the 6th position. But if Coleman is to go marking Tony Kelly, well, I think that spells problems, to be honest. I wouldn't like the sound of that myself now, because Kelly's he's a smart hurler. He's very, very smart forward. He's deadly getting into different pockets of space, occupying space. It's like we were talking about Cian Lynch. He may not have the most on the scoreboard, but he wants such attention that he opens up and situations for other players and gives them opportunities to play well. The likes of O'Donnell's and the Duggans, etc. So that's the biggest test for Cork, really. if they can get supply ball into their forwards will do damage. I don't think the issue is that. I think they'll have learned a lot over the Limerick game the last 2 weeks ago, and certainly from creating space inside and from movement and having energy inside there. That has to change because they can't produce what they produced against Limerick, or otherwise, they're in for a short championship, to be honest. So I think the focus is on the defence. It's been well documented by us. It's been well documented by people in other hurling circles that the defence is an issue. And if they're going to progress in a championship, you have to fix your defence. Like, championships are built on defence. Like, every team who wins has a rock solid defence in any sport, regardless of soccer, rugby, whatever it is. Your defence is primary. So if Cork are to move on, they have to fix their defence. But they can't do it, today and then it'll be fine. They nearly have to do it over the course of time somewhat, if you know what I mean. I don't think they can make such a drastic decision by putting someone in at 6 straight away and expect them to produce the type of stuff that Declan Hannon could or John Conlon could. So there's so many variables, so many ways that we can talk about this topic, and it's like you nearly have to wait and see what happens on the weekend, and then we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, Sarah Nell, the former Dublin and Cork Muggy player, was on OTB last week and was speaking about this, and she was saying, like, it's not entirely down to personnel. A lot of this is an attitude as a team, and she was making the point that if you look at what Waterford and Limerick are doing defensively at the moment, it's all about work rate, it's about swarming around tackles, it's about having that, Paul, that kind of, I guess, the desire to get back, even if it means that you're not even going to get near the ball. You have to be able to sprint back and be in a position to try and cut off a run. And if they don't do that against Clare, like we saw how good Tony Kelly's off the ball movement was last weekend against Tipperary. If Cork aren't on it and they defend like they did at times against Limerick or as they did in the league final, that Clare forward line has got all the firepower to give them loads of problems this weekend.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And, like we're saying with the likes of Limerick and these lads and Waterford, like Liam Cahill basically came out and said it a few weeks ago that the team is based on work rate and, who's willing to work hard. And if you look at Limerick, for all the talk of, obviously they have great players all over the pitch. You look at the likes of Graham Mulcahy. I can see why Graham Mulcahy is there. He starts the work rate right up in the far 21. He's hounding the goalkeeper. He's hounding the full back. He's in causing problems. Goalkeeper catches the ball and he's in on top of him straight away. The ball is fed out and he's still running after him. Like, he's not there for his goal scoring abilities or even his points. He's there because he causes savage problems up there, and that's what they provide. And then tracking back, even Boylan at the moment at full forward, he's providing serious work rate and breaking up play and flicking out balls, which is a platform for Limerick to go forward on. So you can see what they're about. Going back to Cork then, like, Cork have real identifiable problems in their backline. So it's easy for Clare to look at and go, okay, this is what they don't like. They don't like when they have to turn and face back towards their own goal and be chasing back because they just don't seem to know what they're doing. So I would say what Clare will be doing on the weekend will be a case of getting half forward line to come right out towards midfield, make the Cork half back line come right out, and then you're going to have runners going in behind. You're going to have Galvin in at the full forward line anyway, causing problems. But I think that's where you're going to see the real around then. Like, you can even see John Conlon breaking through the middle there. But they're going to ask the question of bring the Cork half back line right out. But on the flip side of that is Cork may actually put in the changes necessary. Like, they may say, listen lads, we're going to sit really deep here off the back of the Limerick action. We're going to sit really deep here. But again, I'd agree exactly with that point that she was making, that I don't think it's a personnel problem either. You could do all these changes and you could put Tim O'Mahony up and you can move Coleman, but Mark Coleman's one of the best hurlers in the country, and for me, if he doesn't really know what's going on in centre back, I think the real problem is that Cork don't really know what they're about in terms of they have a plan A, but what's plan B when it's not going well? What's when we're going back towards a goal, what are we meant to be doing? Man marking, who's marking who? Because a lot of the time the problems we see with Cork is that players drift and there's no one accounting for them. So is it zonal is what we're doing, or so there's lots of questions there for Cork. I'd agree. I think it's more of a tactical thing that they have to figure out for themselves, because there's some weeks here we're complimenting Cork and how really good they are going forward, but the one consistent thing comes up is going backwards. So they have the personnel there, they have the hurlers, there's no doubt about it, but I would agree that I think it's a tactical thing that they need to sort out. They have the personnel necessary to win these games.
James, just to pick up on, we were talking about the Pokeouts last week and we particularly put a focus on Galway. Not long after you and I were chatting, I got sent a message by Sean Flynn, who was writing a piece for the 42 about short Pokeouts, and I thought it was quite interesting. You had picked up on Galway. I hadn't realised how stark it had been when they were going short in the second half. I remember they were kind of going one step and then a longer pass into the opposition half. They retained only 9% of their own puckouts from a short puckout that actually made it to the other half of the field. That generally it was actually a short puckout to a defender going either one more pass or long, and they lost possession on 10 of the 11 puckouts. Remarkably enough, Cork the week before against Limerick as well, so this isn't for last weekend because obviously Cork weren't playing. Cork against Limerick retained only 5 of their 23 puckouts where they went short, and after Collins had pucked the ball out, they tried to go longer as well. It's amazing when we talk about teams pressing up on puckouts and what happens afterwards. It's amazing how ineffective those two teams were on weekend one on their short puckouts, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's huge. And like you talk about plan A, plan B, plan C, and I can talk about this till the cows come home about the puckouts, and everyone looks at the goalkeeper and they say, "Geez, why did he puck it there? Why did he do that?" But it's all collective. Like, the goalkeeper, I often say to our guys at home in the club, instead of the Galway guys, like, I don't dictate where the ball goes. Like, you dictate where the ball goes judging by your movement. So if you offer enough space or a good lane or a good line to say, we'll give you the ball. Granted, we might miss the odd one, but 9 times out of 10 we'll give you the ball. That's exactly what Nicky Quaid is doing with Limerick. He's just waiting. He's waiting to see what develops, who gives him the best option, and then he hits it. And if no option develops or no let's say no 70-30 develops, he pumps it down to where those numbers. When you have the likes of Hegarty and Morrissey and these lads who can retain any type of ruck ball, they're on to win or there. But let's say take the Galways, take the Wexford, take the Corks. Like, it's that amount of possession loss on your long puck out. Obviously statistically speaking, it doesn't look good. But if you can maintain enough pressure up there that when the ball hits the ruck and you can maintain a Wexford can't get out or a Limerick can't get out and they poke the ball into your middle third, that's not too bad. That's all right. It's if they turn you over, like win their puck out and then break free where they've numbers running. Case in point, think about the last puck out in the Galway Wexford game, whereby we were dispossessed and runner up through the middle, which create a foul, and next thing it's a draw. That's a bad situation. But if you can have a full court press whereby, yes, we'll put the ball down in the 13 corner or the 15 corner, we'll press up on top of you then when you have the ball, and if he can't get out, we'll turn you over just like Limerick. So like Limerick get, I heard a statistic, I can't be sure of it now, but I'm going to say it's somewhere in the region of like 70% of Limerick scores against Cork were generated from like turnovers or something of the sort, So
yeah, I think it was 71% of their scores
71%.
were getting the ball back from the opposition. Yeah.
So they're looking at the opposition saying, right, we're going to actually use your game plan against you. We're going to take the ball off you in play and put it over the bar. So if you have a situation to puck out whereby you've got a collective agreement, we're going to fire it down there in the far corner. If we win it, fantastic. If we don't, we'll put so much pressure on them through work rate and through good tackling, let's say, that we'll turn them over in a good zone. You're in a shooting zone straight away if you can turn them over within your own 65. Well, it's your own 45 nowadays, the range is so long. But the puck outs is the science. When things click lovely, it looks like Limerick. And you'll often look at Keane Lynch and Hegarty and you're saying to yourself, how are they popping into such space? But if you watch the Limerick lads, like for every probably 8 and 10 puck outs, they stay in around the middle. If you can picture the big poles of the nets, the nets behind the goals, picture the big poles, they stay in around that. And then they just break in different directions at different times. That's all they do. Do you know what I mean? And then the other 2 out of 10 times, they occupy a wing and Nicky fires it down. So it's not like as if they've got this big scientific game plan. He just gets a situation presented to him by the forwards and Nicky takes it. And he's so good at taking it at this stage now that it looks like a fine art at this stage.
Yeah, just to highlight how good Limerick are at retaining possession when they go short and work it. So Limerick at Páirc Uí Chaoimh had 18 puckouts. 13 of them ended up being retained by a Limerick player when it went into the opposition half. So that's 72%. Next best on weekend one was Wexford on 36. So just goes to show what a difference Limerick have.
Do you know what they do, right? So like if teams go 3 and 3, so 3 full back line, 3 half back line, right? That's what opposition would expect. When you're setting up an opposition puck out, you're expecting they go 3 and 3, but Limerick put 4 and 4. So you'll often see Jim and Burns going back into the 2 corner. Do you ever notice that? And they create 4 players then, and then they bring back their 2 midfielders in to create another 4. So the Cork forwards are looking at this and saying, we've only got 6. How can we push up on this? Ball goes out to a full back line. Next team got 4 options, the half back line, and runners coming through. No one can do a thing with it. They just can't do a thing with it because it's something. It's unorthodox and it's something that teams have never seen before. You can move in and out. You can go close to the sideline. Come infield. That's something that it's obvious. That every team will prepare for that. But when you introduce bigger numbers into that zone of, let's say, within your own 50-yard line, opposition teams don't know how to counteract it.
Paul, something else that Limerick do extremely effectively, and this was picked up by a few of the stats watchers at the weekend too. They had 4 sidelines, which they took short and didn't even attempt to pass it too far forward. It was literally a short 3 or 4 yard pass. Ball comes back and it's worked for a score. They kind of remind me a little bit of Pep Guardiola's Barcelona now. Remember they went and Darragh Donovan took a sideline against you guys in 2019. It was 50-50 and ended up going out. Probably should have been a 65. Limerick are now more than happy to just work it short and try and take a sideline as an extra possession and just recycle the ball and keep going again. That has to be something conscious they're doing if they went short that often against Waterford at the weekend.
Yeah, it's just like, I think you can apply what Limerick are doing like to the short Pokeouts and to the sidelines. Limerick aren't afraid to pick up the ball when the man is only a yard or 2 or 3 behind him, whereas traditionally that's kind of taken in hurling that's actually, that ball isn't on. But Limerick, that ball is always on with Limerick. They're not afraid if there's a man behind them a yard or 2 to pass it to that player, because they have the belief and the confidence that the players are skillful enough, strong enough, have all the tools needed to not only win that ball but then to actually go forward and do something productive with it, that they're not going to actually lose it. So yeah, like I think it's definitely something that they're definitely consciously doing. It's not a case of they wait till the match and go, oh sure, look, there's nothing on, I'm just going to take a chance on this. Like I was marking 2019, I was marking Casey, and something he would do was that he would walk away from the sideline. Like he never took a sideline, but he would walk away from it as if he had nothing to do with it and turn and sprint back at it. And he didn't really care if you were 2 yards behind him or a yard behind him. He was just creating that yard. That's all he was doing. He didn't care that he was trying to get 10 yards away from you. So it's something that they don't really mind. As far as they're concerned, if they win the ball, be it from a short puck out, and as long as they have 4 lads there with 3, let's say, opposition players up trying to mark them, but they're only marking space because he can't cover the 4 men, that's enough. That's okay, I can give it to Diarmaid Burns. He's in 5 yards of space. Why? Because I believe Diarmaid Burns is going to get that ball into his hand, and Sean Finn, I know Sean Finn is going to be running off the shoulder. I pop it to Sean Finn, I know, going to have someone coming deep and there's going to be someone off the shoulder. Mike Casey's going to be off the shoulder, whatever. The exact same principle they're doing to the sidelines. They're going, I'm looking over there now, I see Grode Hegarty, I see Will O'Donoghue with a half a yard of space. I know that them boys are going to get that ball into their hand, and once they get the ball into their hand, it's the principle of there's going to be a man off that they can just pop the ball away, and that just seems to be what they're doing. So I don't think they look at it necessarily as in the sideline or a short free or a puck out or whatever. They look at the principle that if there's a player that has a yard or 2 of space, they see that as that player is free, I can give the ball to that player, and the player receiving is fully aware that can happen as well. So what I think they're just trying to do is they're just creating gains in every area of the pitch. Traditionally, if you were marking them for a sideline or any team for a sideline, you will go and watch any club game. If you afford a club player the space that, let's say, Limerick are afforded, if you offer a club player that space, they look at it and go, I'm not going to pass it to that player because that pass isn't on. But with Limerick, it is on, because they just believe half a yard of space, that's enough. And what way can we turn this sideline? Whereas with Waterford, Austin Deason will just cut it over the bar. Limerick look at it, well, maybe a better percentage chance here is pass the ball short into the hand, recycle it back out, score over the bar. So I just think the gains are just everywhere with Limerick, and the sidelines is just symptomatic of that they're just everywhere. They're just making savage inroads into where can we get this ball over the bar, where can we make a chance out of this.
James, big picture then about the Gaelic grounds on Saturday. I thought, firstly, really good game, great intensity about it. Scoring burst from Limerick wins the game for them in the third quarter, if there were still water breaks now at this stage. But I thought they were worthy winners. But how do we assess this? Is this a Limerick team who are missing 20% of their All-Ireland starting team and probably as vulnerable as they'll ever be when Cian Lynch then goes off during the game too? Did Waterford miss a chance here? Or do we focus on the fact that Waterford were beaten by double digits the last 2 times they played Limerick in championship games, and they were able to score 2 goals and bring that margin right down? What's your feeling coming out of it? Chance missed or indications that Waterford are closing the gap?
I just wanted to see, let's say, if Limerick did prevail, this is my thinking before the game. If Limerick prevail, I want to see how close Waterford have closed the gap. And when they win 7-up, it felt the same. It felt the same, honestly. Even though you're looking across the Limerick team and saying, "Jeez, there's no Kyle Hayes, Seamus Flanagan, Peter Casey, Cian Lynch." You're like, my God, you're talking about 4 of Limerick's best players, and they're not on the pitch. And it was, you know what, the word I used with it was frightening. It was frightening how good Limerick are, and they completely nullified Tadhg de Burka. You know, I did think that Waterford losing Iarla Daly was unsettling. You know, because he was doing okay on Galan. You could say okay. Galan kind of exploded after Daly goes off, but it was unsettling a bit. But it just seemed like Limerick had enough. Like, and it always comes down to shots. Like, Limerick would always every game above 40 shots in championship. So like if you're not matching their shot selection and their efficiency, you're in trouble. So if you're considering 2 goals, it's great, fantastic. But in terms of scoring opportunities with Limerick, they're going to get their 30-32 points every day. They're going to shoot between 40 and 45. and if they're like in ridiculous form, they'll get 50 shots. So, and they'll hit 60% of that, if not 65. So you have to match that, and there's no team putting out those numbers at the moment. So that's what I'm coming away thinking. God, Limerick are still producing 45 odd shots. They're still having an efficiency rate of 70%. So who's putting up those numbers to try and challenge them, even when they don't have 4 of their best players? And there's nobody at the moment. So I came away thinking that, like, if we're given the power rankings again, Limerick have gone to, obviously they're in first, don't get me wrong, but there's no one in a close second. Now I'm not trying to be disrespectful to any team, but you're seeing that as I said last week, Waterford gave their best punch. Got the 2 goals. You're thinking they're back in it here again, but Limerick just had enough, and they had shots at the end there with Reedy and Pat Ryan and Gallagher and whatnot that they could have tacked on a few more points. Colin O'Neill, when he gets a bit hotter, those wides will turn to points. So it's like they've filled the gaps of the people who they're missing. And when you can afford to take your all-star full back and put them out to wing back, as if and nothing changes in your team. Like there's no issue with the balance of the team, with the way it's played or the game plan. It's all business as usual. God, it's extremely impressive, and I don't think any other team in the country has the ability to do that. You can take your full back. It's unreal.
I was going to say, Joe Brawley would kill me for pulling up different stats and bits, but this is from Statsman on Instagram, who was keeping track of the shots that took place at the Gaelic grounds. And again, just to speak about the consistency, Paul, that James just mentioned, 41 shots from Limerick, 30 scores. That seems to be just par for the course for them in pretty much every championship game now. Like unbeaten in 12 championship matches. This is just what Limerick do time after time, and that's even if 2 of the best hurlers in the country aren't playing.
Yeah, and it just goes back to, I think, just it's the principle of what they're doing. It's not a case of they're randomly taking shots. Regardless of what personnel they have on the pitch, the Limerick, I suppose, the Limerick plan is that they're going to shoot from good places. They do take long shots and so on. And we saw Tom Morrissey getting a good point from near the sideline within the 21. But look, it's that kind of big D area that you're talking about there. They're kind of a larger D that, tacticians will talk about it. They're the most high percentage chances of places where you're going to get scores from on the pitch. And Limerick have just the ability to work the ball into those areas. But they also got a few great scores. I think Colin O'Neill got one from on the sideline out near the 65 in the second half. But that's a kind of a confidence thing. Once they start getting the scoreboard going, they start taking these shots. Whereas you look at other teams, there's something taking these shots at the start of the game, and they're not finding their way into the game, and there's no real pattern to what they're doing. But Limerick can just create these chances, and then outside of that, they will go for their shots. You'll have Dessie Burns popping up taking a long range shot, or you'll have the likes of that inspiration stuff with Colin O'Neill and Tom Morrissey, out near the sideline, but he believes he's in a good position to get a point. So you will still have that. But the majority of their scores, which I think is more reflected in the wides, or the lack thereof, that they have 10 and 11 wides a game. They're not racking up 20 wides in a game. That just shows that they're not shooting from everywhere. That, we are hitting wides, but generally we're taking shots from really good positions. Which I think is that just shows the dominance of the power, that they're able to get themselves into those positions. And as a result, you're not taking these crazy shots from everywhere. But the funny thing is about Limerick is that it shows how good they are. They're still capable of getting those scores. They're still capable of popping up. And because they're such good hurlers, they can take a chance on taking that the ball down the sideline on the 21, striking, and because they're creating that nice little leverage for themselves that, generally 90% of the time they're shooting from really good places. So yeah, it's an interesting stat, but probably a stat we all know, that they're just so accurate, they're so lethal. Any sort of a chance, they're able to work the ball around and just get scores, and they're not shooting the ball needlessly over the shoulder like one or two other teams, and when they're trying to find their feet in the game.
Yeah, James, I think we tried to, at different times, search in the dark for issues that could catch up with Limerick at some point. And one of them was, we discussed before, that they've been very loyal to a core group of players in the previous 3-4 seasons that have generally started. But here we are now. Kyle Hayes missed his first championship game under John Kiley. No problem. Boylan comes in, plays quite well. Colin O'Neill had a couple of times when he snatched at shots, but he's a young player. He's going to learn from that. As Paul just mentioned, he got some great scores during the game. He's emerged as a player who you'd be more than comfortable starting a championship game in the half-forward line. I think they're achieving this with Casey out, with Flanagan out long term. They're achieving this with Cian Lynch been out for nearly all of the game last Saturday night. Kyle Hayes not available. And yet Limerick's second string, and what they have from the bench, they got 5 points on the bench at the weekend. I think Waterford had minimal return from the subs that come into the game, and we've been talking about Waterford's strength and depth. Maybe we underestimated how much Limerick actually have in the panel.
Yeah, I put my hand up, and I didn't think they'd be as good when you take out the sort. I said at the start of the year, Will, I said, God, if one or two of their big players gets a couple of knocks and you take them out of the team, have they got the guys to replace them? We mentioned the likes of Lynch, and we said Flanagan at the time. And here we are, we're proving the course they can replace them, because the guys go in and they do a specific job. You know, when you have a guy like Gillan who's shooting the lights out, and Conor O'Neill who can get into space, and Hegarty who can do what he does from shooting, and then you got your midfielders and centre back, and everyone shoots. Like it's common knowledge that Limerick are going to get, like Jim Burns now. I'm expecting him to have six shots a day. You know, that's and he's the flipping wing back. Like, you know, 6 shots a day. It's like it's just madness what they went on. I said months ago about Jim Burns, would he drive you cracked if you're a corner forward? But like, he's popping 5-6 points a game, so how can you can't say a word to him, you know? But like, it's just frightening. That's the only word I use again, because I expected when Keelan Lynch went off, I was kind of rubbing my hands together and saying, right, let's see now what they'll produce. You know, that they're missing a couple of big guys, and didn't take too long for me to get the answer. You know, they're a fabulous team. Like, and I'm as I said when they finished at Ireland last year, you feel privileged to watch them. That's not being, you know, trying to blow them up too much, like I say, but you get these teams who are generational, like, and so that's why you feel privileged to watch a team who, when they're going at full throttle, it's lovely to watch and see what other teams can throw at them. And so far, every team throws something at them, and they'll throw something different in their own way. But Limerick have all the answers. Like, it seems like Limerick have the same game plan, but no one can take it down. That's it. They have the same game plan, and they have the clientele and the power to do so. Their tackling is fucking ferocious. Like Will O'Donoghue is like a truck there in the midfield of the park. Like, he's unreal. And you asked me last week who's their most undervalued player or underestimated player, and I said Nicky. And after the weekend, I was kind of going, geez, Will O'Donoghue is he's surreal. Like, he's a great man to have in the engine room. He's a Michael Finlay 2.0. You know, so like, when you have the people who can do what they can do, it's going to be so hard to beat them this year.
Well, Paul, you had to deal with trying to mark Aaron Gillan previously, and he really came to life. Look, when Iarla Daly came off, like, he was having a decent game of Gillan before he came off, and then they tried 3 different markers after that, and Gillan pretty much cleaned everyone out during the game. It's not that long ago, I remember chatting to Seamus Hickey after the Tipperary game last year about the fact Gillan was on the bench, and he was quick to point out that they were benching Gillan almost to keep him motivated. It was a case of, you need to make sure that he's fighting for his place. Well, what a way to respond if you're Aaron Gillan coming into Championship with the 2 performances he's just put in. His shooting was a bit wayward at times in the league. Perfect shot down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh the first week, and really came to life when his team needed him in that Waterford game too.
Yeah, I think it's really great man management out of John Kiley, if I'm to be honest. The start of the league, Aaron Gillan was taken off at half time against Wexford. Wasn't very effective, and John Kiley wasted no time taking him off the pitch. And I think that's something we can talk about lots of things about great management, and it's not to take away from Aaron Gillan's performance. I mean, it was a great personal performance for him over the weekend, but I think the platform that created that was that, again, it's that management of him that, okay, maybe you have to take him off. That's not to insult the player, but all players have to be managed in a certain way. And I think if any player thinks he's going to be on the team because of past performances, you're not doing a service to that player to leave him on the pitch. So like the likes of John Kiley there, no problem, I'll put Reedy on the freeze. You come off there. I need lads off. I need lads when the opposition have the ball, that they're going to be tackling, they're going to be fighting. I also need you to be winning your own ball. Like that 50-50 ball that comes in, you need to win that. You're not just here to finish off goals or get points. And I think, again, that got the bit between the teeth for Aaron Gillan at the start of the league. He got his reminder, and you're looking over your shoulder then, look at all these lads who were coming in or busting the door down to try and get a jersey, Cathal O'Neill and these lads. So you're very quick to realise that, I need to perform here, or I'll be sitting on the bench because we have an abundance of lads coming through. So at the weekend, I think that's what we saw. We saw that fuel there, that motivation. I mean, he was absolutely exceptional, and like that, Waterford tried so many players on him and just couldn't find a result. And I don't think there was an answer for Aaron Gillan at the weekend. When he does that, there is no answer for him. I think there's lots of players. Well, there's a good few players like that. Dessie Hutchinson, I think, is another player that, if he's on form that day and he's really at the pitch of his game. And there's many, Shane O'Donnell and these lads, there's so many players who are just capable of doing this, but Aaron Gillan is definitely one of them. But again, I just think it comes down to John Kiley knows what he has there in the talent he has, but he has to manage it in a certain way. And look, every player is like that. Every player needs to be managed in a certain way. It needs to be built up, maybe needs to be taken down a peg or two at different times. Every player has their own little things that make them tick, and I think John Kiley has figured out with Gillan how to manage him. I think Gillan recognises that as well, and I think what we're seeing here is, and hopefully he'll prove it right, is that a maturity in Gillan. Like, he's a young player and he's still developing, and I think he's realising this, that to be consistently part of this team, he needs to consistently perform. And it was just an electric performance out of him the weekend, and really, it was the platform that, often we're talking about Keane Lynch being the platform that the Limerick forward line, and when Keane Lynch went away the weekend. Okay, Colin O'Neill came in and got a great score and, you know, got on a fefew balls, but Gillane was the man keeping the show on the road at the forward line in terms of keeping the scoreboard going. So great performance out of him. But like that, I nearly just remind myself of the start of the league when we were talking about him being taken off at half time down below in Wexford Park, to see the performance that he put in over the weekend. So it's a credit to him. But again, you know, he needs to keep putting these performances in. He's capable of doing it. But again, John Kiley will be making sure that he is at the pitch of his game by managing him correctly, which I think he's done brilliantly so far.
Yeah, like as an observer, Paul, on the telly or in press grounds watching him play, I can only think it makes Limerick harder to defend against if Gillane is really on it like he was at the weekend. Because like they love to run the ball, and we mentioned they love to pop the pass to each other and shoot out the field. But Gillane keeps the defence really honest because of his movement in front of goal. And like he's so good at winning his own possession too. You can't afford to push up too far if Gillane is going to be in near the house.
He is, yeah. Like he's asking a lot of questions now, defences, and again, I refer back to that time that, you know, when we played them in 2019, when we were preparing for them, it was, you know, a big question was the space in front of the full forward line, and that they'd be hitting Gillane, they'd be hitting Mulcahy and these guys, and that was something we were really focused on and aware of. And like Hughie Lawler was marking him that day, and Hughie done a great job, but even doing a great job, Gillane got on a good few balls and showed how dangerous he is. His hurl is like a wooden spoon as well. It's a tiny hurl, so the idea that if he wins the ball, you're going to be there hooking and blocking him and that you're going to be all over him, it's very hard with him, because like, not to say it sounds like that simple because the hurl is small, but an inch or two on a hurl to get a hook or to get a flick is huge, you know. So once Gillane gets the ball in his hand, it's a very hard job to try and dispossess him, because he's quite clever as well. He's he's capable of making the space to get his own score, but he's also not afraid to recycle it. So half the battle, and it might sound stupid to say, but half the battle with Aaron Gillane is to try and get out there first and win the ball. And I know a lot of lads will say, sure, that's the same for every player. But the problem is with Gillane is that he creates these runs that he's going left to right in the full forward line. He doesn't stay in the one position, and he's a great understanding with the players out the pitch in terms of that ball landing in front of him. But he's now also shown really well that he's capable of winning the ball in the air. We've seen it in the league that he's actually won quite a few more balls than we'd associate with him in the air, which is another angle to him now, which is making him even more dangerous. But we often see it's just he has it down to a fine art of this drifting in the full forward line, and by the time the camera pans to him, if you're watching it from at home, he has about 5 or 6 yards of space on the defender, and he's now running to the ball at 50% speed because he's getting the ball into his hand, deciding what he's going to do next, and that's because of the work he's doing off the ball. So he's really looking like he's bringing his game up. If the weekend isn't to go by, that he's bringing it to another level. If he keeps doing these performances, I mean, he'd be nearly a shoo-in for Hurler of the Year with racking up scores like that. But look, again, he's going to have to deal with being another marked man. He's always been a marked man over the last few years, but like the likes of Cian Lynch not being there now, and team seeing what Gillane is doing, you know, his cards will be marked. But I think it's a confidence thing with him. If he's hurling like that, it's going to be very hard to stop him.
James, let's have a chat about maybe some of the positives Waterford can take from the game then, because when Limerick go on that scoring burst, and it looks like again they're about to take control of a game, it almost feels like, you know, previous meetings between the teams or the way Limerick were going in Porky Queeve, Waterford fought back, and you were talking about maybe landing a couple of punches. They landed 2 goals, and they've struggled to score goals against John Kiley's Limerick before. I'm sure when they look back in this game, they will say, we didn't die, and we put 2 goals past them. This could be the first of 3 meetings this year.
Yeah, like we asked last week, like, can they mix it with Limerick physically? So that's that box ticked. Yes, they can. Like I don't know how the ref the game at the weekend, because I couldn't differentiate a free from not a free. You know, there were so many hits and slaps and body checks and you name it. It was a great spectacle for us to watch it. I'd say it was a different story for the ref, but it was a very, very physical encounter. So yes, Waterford can match Limerick physically, no problem. Put that aside. Scoring perspective, their efficiency just needs to be better. You know, there's some long shots that they chose, you know, from cornerbacks and whatnot, that just wasn't the right thing to do. And I think they'll learn from it. I know we say this again, this is their 3rd or 4th time playing Limerick in as many years, but they have to. You have to learn fast against Limerick. You really have to learn fast, and you have to do most things right, if not everything right. So if you get an opportunity of a shot, it must fall to a person who has a larger percentage of scoring than let's say your cornerbacks and such, to be honest. They landed 2 goals. You know, like Limerick don't have a slam shut defence. Like they have conceded goals in the past before, but against Waterford they haven't, so that's a plus. And Dessie Hutchinson, in fairness, like Sean Finn kind of had him in the pocket for the last the last while, and like Dessie should have got the ball more when that game was heading into when they got the second goal and Dessie was on fire. Give the ball to Dessie, except there was a couple of shots taken by defenders that shouldn't have happened. It just takes the energy out of a team, and you think, God, if Dessie gets that ball, you're into a draw game again, So like, just thinking their way through it a small bit better. But they ran fierce well at them. Like, you consider the Ozzie Gleeson opportunity where he whipped the ball across the goal. Another day that comes off. You look at the goal he scored against Cork a few years ago. It's another day that comes off, and it's just, they're not that far away. But just that particular game, the way it felt was Limerick were a few points better. I know the scoreline doesn't necessarily say that. It was only 3 points in the end, but it felt like, when you're assessing the game as a whole, that Limerick probably had 6 or 7 over Waterford, to be honest. So you're saying, God, is there much of a difference? But I think Liam Cahill will look back and say, he probably had his own challenges put to the Waterford players. Obviously, a victory is a combination of all those challenges. But when he looks at the way they went up against them physically, they ran at them, and they didn't shy back from Anton. They did okay on a defensive perspective, like not too bad. There is some good positives to take forward there. Now the focus has to be away from Limerick. Just forget about them. Get through your Munster Championship. Win the rest of your games. That's very important. So forget about what has happened a few days ago. Focus on the next game. Get through them and get to a Munster final. And look, it's not the be-all, end-all if they don't get to a Munster final, but in terms of momentum, you want another crack. You want to get exposed to playing Limerick as much as possible to get to know them even better every day you play them. So every day is a learning curve. You either win or you learn. And so the more days you play Limerick, the more you learn. So head for a Munster final, take them on again, and just see where it goes from there.
To pick up on that point, Paul, about the Munster final or not the Munster final, look, Waterford still have to get results against Cork and Clare if they're going to qualify for a Munster final or to qualify out of the province. But this was discussed on Anthony Daly's podcast yesterday afternoon too. This idea that it wouldn't maybe be the end of the world for Waterford if they were to finish up in third place in Munster and to be on the other side of the draw to Limerick so that you don't have to play them again in the Munster final. Will that even enter their thinking in any way at all?
I don't think so, because for Waterford not to be in the Munster final now, like another scalp kind of has to be taken off them for them not to be in the Munster final, which I don't think is good preparation. I think the only scalp that Waterford are happy enough to concede at the moment is Limerick, because we're all talking of it, and I'd say Waterford consider it as well. They're the number 2 team in the country and they're trying to get to the pitch to beat this Limerick team. But in order for them to come third, another result has to be taken off them, really. And I think that's more of a dilemma from Waterford than being beaten over the weekend. Because, like James is saying, they're not that far away. Like, I mean, Limerick just looked like they were strong enough. And again, the Limerick team that were missing players were strong enough to keep them at arm's distance at all time over the weekend. Now, they got 2 quick shot goals then, and, probably, not to say I put a bit of a gloss on the scoreline, but it did in many ways, because Limerick were looking to push away, and 2 good goals, I suppose, particularly the one with Stephen Bennett, the ball into Caleb Lyons, was just exceptional goal, which showed Waterford are capable of doing it. But again, could we say that maybe Limerick dropped down the tempo a small bit as they were, I suppose, creating that bit of space? The gap opened up, Stephen Bennett got through. Does that happen earlier in the game? I don't know. But look, certainly Waterford have shown they're capable of getting goals now, which is a plus. They can take things from the game. But I think if Waterford want to go and win this All-Ireland, they just have to do it the one way, straight up the middle, and that is, don't lose confidence. Go and play this Limerick team again and in a Munster final, and go and have a real good crack at them. Because I think Waterford believe that they are the team to dethrone this Limerick team, and other teams might think that they're capable of doing it on their day, but Waterford fully believe. And if they want to be All-Ireland champions, they have to go and beat every team that's out there and beat them fair and square. Don't try and hope for this ideal pathway through to get to an All-Ireland final where we can now go and beat them and ambush them. You're not going to ambush this Limerick team. So I think they just have to, and I think Waterford players and the whole panel and the management are accepting of this, that they just have to go at it. And we're going to be facing Limerick most likely, we don't know, but most likely in a few weeks we'll be meeting them in a Munster final, and we just have to go at it again until eventually we crack it. And I don't think it'll do Waterford any service to do it any other way by coming third or anything. It means that I think they've taken a step backwards if they come third and then expect them to go on and win the All-Ireland. It doesn't add up for me that's what they do.
Well, James, Waterford shared the scores around a bit. Like the aforementioned Dessie Hutchinson, 5 points in play, which was a fantastic return from him. But is there any concern about the fact that we were lauding Stephen Bennett here 3 weeks ago on the show because of how well he played in the league final? Can't score from play so far in the championship. Any concern?
There is, yeah. We can't say there's not, because coming out of the league, you would have said he's their marquee forward, their scoring forward with Dessie at at a close second. So when your marquee scoring forward, it's a bit like we might touch on it later on. Wexford at the moment, when he's not scoring or not firing, the whole forward unit is not ticking perfectly. It's not as efficient as it should be. So like when we look at, I know we keep saying Limerick, but look at Limerick are the standard bearers. So for everybody listening, tough shit. We're going to talk about Limerick because everyone else is to catch them, right? So Gallagher, he's scoring. He's the guy you're expecting to score, and he's doing it. So like, and with Stephen Bennett, you expect him to score, and he's not doing it. He's missing a couple of frees. You know, like it's just it's not. You're not getting as much out of a player of his capability as he should, and everyone will reference the Cork League final. That's what he's capable of. The reference the game against Tipperary blowing Walsh Park in the league games. That's what he's capable of. So we expect that from him every day. And when he doesn't produce it, it's like the whole Waterford forward machine is not ticking correctly. So if they're going to go forward, if they're going to seriously take down Limerick, he has to be scoring. Like realistically speaking, he has to be scoring at least 5, 6. Something of that regard from play, because you need that. You need, as we said, we need the scoring opportunities. We need that amount of efficiency. We need huge, I'll say effort, but contributions from your big forwards. Huge. That's why when, like, if you take Galway, for example, with Kenning, like, we expected him to score 1-10 every day. Like 1-2, 1-3, 1-4 from play. TJ for same with Kilkenny. You need them lads scoring. You need Hogan scoring like back in the day, because if they don't score from play, you're going to be in a bit of bother. So again, I'll repeat, if Waterford to progress and take down Limerick, they're going to have Dessie Hutchinson hitting 5 points every day. I know it's a large target and people say, how is that possible? But it has to be done. That's what's required to take down Limerick. And like Bennett will have to hit the 110, 111, 112 every day without fail, in order to produce something special and take down Limerick.
His efficiencies from frees in the 2 games were reasonably decent. Missed a few along the way. Limerick missed nothing at the weekend. 100% record for frees. That's where Diarmaid Burns has become so useful as well, Paul. Like, he's equal his scoring for the last 2 championships in these first 2 championship games, which means now if you're going to foul Limerick in their own half, this guy could easily bomb it between the posts from long range.
Yeah, he could. And you contrast it with Waterford as well. Like, something to be critical, I suppose, of Austin Gleeson over the last while is that Austin Gleeson goes back and tries to do the same thing, or even tries to do it from further back, but Limerick seem to have it very set in what we're doing. And Diarmaid Burns is an exceptional free taker, whereas, even thinking back to the week before, Austin Gleeson going back to take a free nearly in his own 21, that doesn't happen if you're Limerick. Diarmaid Burns does not go back there and take that free. He might go back and take it, but he's not going to go for a point. Whereas you don't know, like, I was kind of looking at the game, and it's one thing I was thinking about just with Waterford is that who's going to stand over which free, and it nearly depends on a few things, who's going to stand over which free. And now I know Stephen Bennett takes a majority of them, but like often Austin Gleeson come out sometimes then, and we saw him hitting wides from frees at the weekend. Diarmaid Burns doesn't do that, so never mind taking the free, but Diarmaid Burns obviously has this down to a fine art, because it's nearly like Sean McMahon back in the day with Clare. It's just you stood over him and it was joy to watch, and it was these Lorden frees that were just impeccable, and the way he struck the ball and everything is brilliant. So Diarmaid Burns, what he provides for Limerick, Waterford don't really have that at the moment. They're kind of doing it with Austin Gleeson, but it's not as consistent. And for me, I kind of find as well, I think it takes the wind out of your sails a small bit when you have someone who's trying to do it but can't really do it. So something as well Waterford I think need to do, because again, only 3 points at the weekend, that could have easily been picked up with kind of longer range frees if you maybe had your house a small bit more in order. But it was just something I think that, again, we're still talking of it. Everything we say, Limerick have it and Limerick do it, and in this way Diarmaid Burns does really well. But like Waterford have Austin Gleeson going back taking a few frees, and he did get 1 or 2 of them over the weekend, but he also hit wides, and he's done it in other matches as well, which I think is kind of a little bit of a killing blow. At least keep that ball in play. If you think it's too far for you, keep it in play. Let the forwards work for it, or even do something a bit more creative for the centre forward comes running out towards the 65 and pop it to him and try and create a score. But Limerick seem to have all these things answered for it. They know what they're going to do, whereas the likes of Waterford are trying to gain on them. There's certainly an area where they can improve on, and where you could maybe get those 3 points reclaimed back.
Big mistake I made not to pick Diarmaid Burns in fancy hurling. Went for Kyle Hayes, then Kyle Hayes pulls his hamstring in the first round. Meant I had to make 3 subs because good old Brian Cody had to go and make changes for Kilkenny. Drops a couple of his players who played well in the first game. He said to give people a run against Laois. Thanks a lot for that, Brian. Which meant that I had a couple of players that scored 0 this week. We're not doing great, by the way. This is probably a good time to talk about where we are.
Speak for yourselves, lads.
Well,
Murphy, I actually thought you pulled out of fantasy. We've gone so far down, I actually thought you left it.
Well, I was looking at it and Paddy Maher was behind me, so I was there going, that's brilliant. I don't know why I took confidence from that, but I'm taking so little
There's
things.
the Tipp Kilkenny thing again.
There's so little consolation to be taken from my position. But like, I was looking at it going, geez, I'm after having a great week this week. And I actually thought I had Caleb Lyons. I thought I changed him out the weekend, and I saw that he was doing really well. It was actually Jack Fagan I had. And then I was going, geez, and then I couldn't remember which Cooney I was after putting in, and you were praising Joseph Cooney, and I had Conor Cooney, centre forward, who puts in good performances, but no, I'm not flying it at the moment in the fantasy hurling.
Well, going to give some praise to the players who are towards the top of our league here. Number one, Dermot McGill, the manager of the O'Moore's Camogie team in Laois. His club is Ballyfin. Got 322 points this week, which is just an insane score. His team through the signs. 538 has him right up there in the National League table as well. We've got some very clever listeners who are doing really well. Kieran Kenrick from Moyle Rovers got nearly 300 points, 296 this week. He's just a point behind Dermot overall. And Shane Hassett from Drummond Inch is just behind them on 535. They're our top three currently, which is insane. I think I'm in 45th position currently within the league. I'll do a quick check for James Skehill here to see where he's going. I think, 30. James, you were around... Were you actually top 30?
Top 30, you can sing it.
He's not. He's 77th in our league.
What?
Go away all that. I was checking the other day.
I was 80th on the first count on Monday, and they kind of do a recount. And I was there checking it today, so I'll have a look there now. Surely I've picked up a few points. I'm down to 82 now.
Here you are. Skell's on 77. Although you had a good week, James. 294 this week is good going.
The Hurling Pod, right? Let me go into this now. And if I click, I'm on 29, the Hurling Pod.
Oh, no, wait. You're 77 overall. That's actually not bad.
That's good going.
I want a written apology off you, Will.
Well, look. Sorry now. I thought when I was searching within the league, that's where you were within the league itself. And Paul Murphy's 82nd overall. That's not bad.
No, I think that... Is that overall?
I think so.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Paul Murphy's 75 in our league.
Oh, sorry, I read the wrong... Oh, jeez, I'm not doing too bad, so...
Oh, no, he's doing all right. You see, this is the worst part. We thought, because we were so far down in our own league, that we weren't doing great. Just turns out, it seems our league is stacked with some of the best players in the entire game.
But that seems to be it.
Like Dermot McGill, 530. Jesus.
That's gone. I'm not catching him.
Yeah, I'm well behind in my club and county leagues as well, as it's all refreshing here in the background. But if anyone wants to join, I'll stick the code up if you're watching the YouTube version currently. We also have the code up on Off the Ball's Twitter as well. I think you can still join along even if you weren't part of the league in week one. You can still take part in it. All right, let's do a bit of jumping around then when we realise we're maybe doing a little bit better in fantasy than we thought we were originally, but still well behind in our own league. James, we'll go back over to Leinster because Wexford have put themselves in a right sticky wicket now after their first two games because they started with the two homes and they're on the road for the next 3 weekends after this. They would have been hoping to have maximum points, obviously, but they would have been hoping to have more than 1 point from the first two games. A very potentially damaging result for them losing to Dublin on Saturday afternoon.
It is very damaging, and it's squeaky bum time now. When I was assessing Wexford, I thought they generally only have 2 points coming out of the first two games. So 1 point in the way the championship is structured and the value of a draw versus a win, 1 point is as bad as a loss. That sounds a bit ridiculous, okay, at this moment in time, but it has to be considered who takes the point off you. So they've only got 1 point off two of the big four, if you like, and they've Kilkenny to come. So if Kilkenny take them down, they've got 1 point out of 3 games. So they'll likely, if I'm reading correctly now, they'll finish with 5 points over the course of the round robin, and that won't be enough to finish in a 16 third place. Dublin have obviously got 4, and with respect, they're going to get 2 more off Westmeath, so they're going to obviously finish with 6. Galway at the minute have 3, and that's why this weekend's game of Kilkenny becomes just a monumental game. It's huge, and if Galway take down Kilkenny, it puts Wexford in a worse position. Mm-hmm. So if Kilkenny take down Galway, there's some solace in that at least they look at like Galway being beaten by a team, again one of the top 4, so they'll see some light there. But they didn't help themselves at all. I watched the game live. It was a good affair. Like, it wasn't from a hurling quality perspective, it wasn't up there with the Munster games, but from an intent, physicality, excitement level, it was very good. And I just thought Wexford were poor enough. Let's say their forwards, from 8 to 15, they only got 13 points, overall. So that's just not enough. That's like we're talking about, what Stephen Bennett and Dessie Hutchinson have to produce to take down Limerick, but the Wexford forwards have to produce an awful lot more than that. 20 points is nothing in today's inter-county game. 30 points it looks to be a minimum nowadays. So I kind of worry a bit for Wexford. Like Rory O'Connor seems to be doing an awful lot of the work by himself. Like he's winning his own frees. Not necessarily scoring them after he wins them, but he's winning his own frees. I think Lee Chin, if you're fit enough to come on, you're fit enough to start. That's my book. Like that has to be done now. So if Lee Chin comes on and takes free straight away, he has got to be starting the next day. No two ways about it. I know that they're playing Laois the next day. Will he be starting the next day? Hard to know. So, but when they played the big teams, he's got to start because they're just not getting enough out of the forward unit. And they look, again, I use the word disjointed. That's the way they look a bit. They'll have to change up their Pokeouts strategy a small bit. They'll have to change up the way they deliver balls to the forwards. They'll have to change their penalty taker. There's things that Wexford are going to have to do in the very, very immediate if they're to progress, and they're in a bit of a pickle at the moment.
Yeah, on the penalties, Paul, given now that Mark Fanning has missed them in successive weeks, they probably have to make a change now, don't they? Because like his confidence on hitting them is probably going to be quite low. It's not that long ago, I remember the season they won Leinster where Mark Fanning seemed to score every time he stepped up to take a penalty, but missing 2 in successive weeks, that's got to damage your confidence.
Yeah, it's not an easy one. It's a strange one because they mightn't get any more penalties about it, so it could become a kind of thing that it's needless to do in the end. But certainly, maybe it's something in their best interest where they go, look, if you're getting a penalty in a game, you need to be scoring it. It's a great platform, especially the way the penalties are now. Like as in just having just one keeper on the line, and then you're having someone come up. So again, you need your penalty. You see Tony Kelly at the weekend coming up, and just no doubt about it, he is hanging it up. You'd say the same with Kilkenny having TJ. TJ steps up, and even when the keeper goes the right direction. Now, in fairness to Sean Brennan over the weekend, it was a great save because Fanning didn't do a whole lot wrong. It was down and it was low, and it appeared to be right into the corner. But at the same time, Brennan got down really well, and it didn't seem like there was a real rasp on the ball, that the ball was flying into the bottom corner. He had time to get down there and make a great save. But certainly, yeah, look, if you're missing 2 penalties, just from a housekeeping point of view going forward, you have to kind of say, listen, big calls have to be made. Rory O'Connor, step over that there now and maybe change it. I know James will probably disagree with me now. Maybe you're not showing a confidence in your keeper, but
no,
you have to score these.
I agree with you, Murph. Like I was looking at Fanning's run up, and I would say his run is very, very slow up to it. So as a goalie, you can read him a small bit. And then another telling sign is the last week 2 weeks ago against Galway, he put his first penalty top left and over the bar, and he changed completely then to bottom right, which signified to me that he wasn't sure where he was going. Yeah. When you look at Tony Kelly taking the penalty, he's nearly racing up to the ball. I'm putting this ball top right, save it if you can. Yeah. And even as a goalie, when you see a fast run up, you don't have time to read his body. If you see a slow run up, you can kind of half read him. And if you watch Brendan the goals, he's to the left of the black spot as you look behind him. Yeah. So he's reading Fanning and he gets down low. Great save. Yeah. Because traditionally, like, you'd look at Fanning and say he's a right-sided player, which means they generally go across their body. So Brennan would have assumed, or I'd always assume 80% of the time they go to my right because he's a right-sided player. But he went down and Brennan read it perfect. But I have to, if I'm the manager, I have to change it more. It's 2 penalties in a row missed. I remember Conor McDonald took one in the Leinster final in 17 and it was Pewter. And so, like, that, I don't know, is he the option? So, like, Rory O'Connor, stand over that ball and bury it. That's the size. Keep it low and your chances are very good. Because it's just, like you said, great words used there, Murph, housekeeping. Tidy up on these things. Get Sheen on the park. Get him taking the frees. Get him taking the penalties if that's the case as well. But they just need to tidy up across the board.
I think as well, James, the free taking is going to have to be on point. Now, they're going to have to run up scores in these next couple of games because they go to the Midlands on successive weekends. So they've got Laois, then Westmeath over the next couple of weeks. So they need to be putting big scorelines up in both those games. The frustrating thing, I think, for Wexford last weekend was that Dublin were really good. Now, some of their defenders played brilliant. Like, we're talking maybe about how good Owen O'Donnell was at the weekend. But when it came to Rory O'Connor and when he got his feet moving, Dublin were very good at kind of sharing the fouls around to a certain extent. And they gave away frees, and they were taking the risk that those frees were going to be missed. That's been an issue for Wexford over and over in the last few years, that they don't have the free-taking efficiency of the top teams, and therefore it's better to foul Rory O'Connor than to let him to run at you.
You're right, and especially fouling in Wexford Park was a bit of a breeze. And when Wexford played Limerick in their first league game, we applauded them for their work ethic and how they produced a result. But we did say that the frees could come against them in the championship. So, like, you'll see, against Galway, Conor Cooney rarely misses a free. Against Kilkenny, TJ very rarely misses a free. So these guys aren't really going to miss. You look at Donald Burke now for Dublin, unless it's within a certain range or beyond a certain range, should I say, he's not going to miss either. And like, you talk about the Dublin defence, like, even when they went to man down, like, Donnacha Ryan was class. Like, the way he went forward He doesn't look like the most stylish hurler, but he's pure energy and pace, and he just occupied Wexford all along down that left wing. And so their defence was excellent. O'Donnell, saw that guy a number of years back. I know Matty Keaney well, and he says O'Donnell is the top fullback in the country, and I don't dispute Matty. He sees him closer than we do. O'Donnell is top class. I do believe he'd make any team in the country, regardless of who we're talking about here. And he's just a gem to have, and you see the way he's able to go forward and score as well whilst locking down someone. Don't get me wrong now, he does flip and work with what Conor McDonald produces and Rory O'Connor produces, but he's able to cater for it. So he's a huge person to have in your full back line, which is such a critical place nowadays, because you have to have the pace and the power, of a halfback and a full forward at the same time. So look, Dublin will be delighted. They've got 4 points. The best possible start that they could have hoped for, and with bigger games to come, so they've gathered some momentum. So who knows what their ceiling is?
Well, Paul, we bemoan bad defending, so this is a chance to actually speak about good defending. And there were 2 moments that kind of really stood out for me. Was one where O'Donnell put his paw up and came out with the ball when Wexford were trying to get a score and were starting to lay siege a little bit, and you're thinking, these are the type of lifts that you need. The missed penalty, O'Donnell been able to go up there and put his paw up there. And then Sutcliffe, towards the end of the game, we talk about defending from the front. He could easily have just went to block a passing lane, allowed the long pass to go in and let his defence deal with it. But Sutcliffe bursts himself to get up to get a block with 2 minutes left on the clock.
Yeah, and it was just symptomatic of the difference of attitude between both of the teams. I think we saw it was just everywhere. I think Ray Boyne had it up over the weekend. It was just everywhere, the block that Sutcliffe did. But that just typified what Dublin were about the weekend, and the complete opposite of what Wexford were about. Because I saw one clip on the Sunday game there, and it was basically the one where Rory O'Connor put the great ball across for Conor McDonald for the goal, and they were just saying, how well Rory O'Connor did to get that ball across, and that he took out 5 Dublin defenders. But for me, I was looking at it going, well, there was 5 Dublin defenders back at least, and where were the rest of the Wexford forwards supporting Rory O'Connor in this position? And that just showed, Wexford weren't really willing to lay a hand in Dublin. And Dublin went to Wexford Park and they said, look, we're going to go here, a team that's playing really well. Okay, came out of a draw in the last match, but a team that performed savagely well in the league, bar their last game, and went down and turned them over and did what they had to do. And I kind of was delighted for Matty Kenny in one way, because he's taken a bit of flack over the last few years, particularly of, what is this Dublin team about? And look, we've been critical of them as well. Great game against Tipp in the league, but then Kilkenny go out and hammer them. That was the last really significant match they've had as well. So a great win out of Dublin to go down to Wexford Park and do that. And they'll take huge confidence from that as well, because you look at the flip side of it. They went down with great aggression, and we're talking with Danny Sutcliffe with, I'm going to go out here and throw my body on the line. Wexford get the ball back, they run up. Liam Ryan has a great chance to put the ball over the bar, passes it off the youngest man in the pitch, and Pepper don't know what to do, game over. Yeah. Wexford now have to go on the road for 2 games now. I think it's 2 games are on the road, but they have to go and play. They have to play Laois and Westmeath. They're not going to take a huge amount from it, not to be any insult. And Laois could put a serious battle up to them, seeing what Laois are performing with at the moment. Laois could perform something against Wexford, but I don't think Wexford are going to learn a huge amount before they go to Nolan Park. And now they have 1 point on the board at the moment, whereas the likes of Dublin, Dublin have 4 points on the board now and in a good position. We'll learn a lot from Kilkenny and Galway over the weekend, but for Wexford at the moment, it's not going to do them any good. I think it's a confidence thing, it's an attitude thing with Wexford at the moment. We know they have the hurlers, they're performing really well in the league, but they seem to be drifting at the moment. They don't really seem to know. The aggression has gone out of their game. They didn't lay a hand on Dublin over the weekend. So Wexford are kind of going to, I suppose, they're going to go to the latter stages of the Sunday game in terms of what's going to be shown for them, because they're going to be playing Laois and Westmeath, and then they're going to have to go to Nolan Park. And I can guarantee anyway, Kilkenny, after the last few years of Wexford and playing Wexford, Kilkenny will be savagely aggressive with Wexford coming to Nolan Park, regardless what happens over the next few weeks. So, Wexford are in a tricky situation at the moment, and they've made a lot of hard work. At the start of this championship, we were talking about Wexford in terms of having more favourable draw, in terms of having 2 of the big teams at home where you can go and win those games and create a platform for yourself for the rest of the championship. They now have 1 point out of the 4 points. Not a good position to be in, where other teams, Dublin have done good work now. They have their 2 wins, they're sitting pretty. Kilkenny are the same. Okay, Kilkenny now have the 3 hard matches coming, but Wexford for how they performed in the league, are in a bit of a sticky spot at the moment. But in fairness, I think I have to give all the plaudits to Dublin at this stage. Great performance, and I think at the final whistle you saw what it meant to Dublin as well. You know, all the players were really, you know, celebrating the victory, and like, you know, celebrating it in a really good way. They were just going around patting each other on the back. We did the hard work. You know, we can go home now with our 4 points on the board, and, you know, finishing up where we started off. Danny Sutcliffe's block just typified what Dublin were about the weekend. And look, I just think all the credit really has to go to Dublin for a real tough performance in Wexford Park, coming out with just the finest of margins. But it's great, and like I said, it's great for Matty Kenny as well, because I think he deserves it with the hard work he's put in with Dublin. Yeah,
James, when it comes to Dublin now, look, there's still 2 difficult games for them to come. They've still got Galway and Kilkenny in the mix here that they have to get through if they're going to get to back-to-back Leinster finals, but couldn't have hoped for a better start. If they go down and win a Mullingar, they're going to be very well placed, because they'll have 6 points on the board after their first 3 games, which would be the expectation coming out of this weekend. Do we think that Dublin are now going to qualify given the good start that they've had?
It's hard to see how they don't, because after this weekend again you'd assume that they're going to have 6 points with a big game to come. They'll target both games. No, Matty Kinney, he's not going to say we'll pick one game, give our best effort and try to take 2 points. He's going to go for 4 points, finish top of the group and head for the Leinster final. It's hard to bet against them, Will. It's hard to bet against them. Like, I didn't think myself they'd go down and beat Wexford after the Laois performance. Lo and behold, they do what they did. So they're on an impressive run, and again I use that word momentum. Momentum is a huge thing when you're on trying to produce a successful run. So like, it's hard to bet against them at the minute. Like, the scales have tilted in their favour. But again, they won't get the opportunity or the allowances they got in Wexford Park. Like, they were allowed to make mistakes and still be able to retain the ball. Their first touch wasn't in sometimes in their forwards, and still there was no Wexford back going on them. So they're not going to get that. Beyond this weekend, obviously, they'll have 2 huge games with Kilkenny and Galway, and I guarantee that neither team will give them a fraction of the space nor the time that they were allowed for in the last 2 games. So it was going to be challenging. We always say that from the outset. Like, when you got 4 teams who were vying for 3 places, you know, someone's going to have to produce a big performance, or else produce a bad one to get knocked out. So, but again, you touched on it there a minute ago, and so did Murph. The score difference is going to be very, very important. Like, so I'm tracking that from a goal perspective now, looking at the Westmeath game from the weekend, and then looking at Kilkenny, what they produced themselves, and thinking, God, you have to keep the score ticking over. So when you get the opportunity, again, respectfully, against the Westmeath and the Meads or Laois, you're going to have to put, unfortunately so, it's just the way the championship, you're going to have to put the foot in the throat and score as much as you can to rule out that possibility of going out in score difference. I know all too well about it. So like, that's probably going to happen this weekend. Dublin are going to target the Westmeath game to throw up a big score on them, and you know, again, it might come down to that as the championship unfolds.
Well, I don't know if Parnell Park a few years ago was in the mind when it came to Galway, James, at the weekend in Salt Hill, but, you know, 26-point victory, 337 put up on the board, 225 scored in that first half. That's a ruthless performance by your county there.
But it had to be. It had to be like, I won't say it was called for, but it was just a necessity. And you don't like to see these beatings being dished out to counties who are trying to improve. But unfortunately, it's a dog-eat-dog situation here, and Galway are trying to progress, and Westmeath are effectively, he was want for a better phrase, were in the way. So you have to put as much on top of them as possible, and then Kilkenny go down the road and Kilkenny did the exact same thing to Laois. So like, you know, there's no room for sympathy or empathy in this championship, I'm afraid.
No, that's the truth, Paul. And like, when it comes to Kilkenny, again, big scoreline run up, quite a few chances actually left behind in that game against Laois too. They had 18 wides, I think, during the game, but Kilkenny still scored 2 goals and 34 points. Laois's chances not helped, very well documented the injuries that they've got currently. Podsley, their vice captain's missing. Picky Maher, Ross King was missing this week, just gone by. Willie Dunphy's not been available. Missing kind of 4 or 5 key starters. Ben Conroy not available currently either. Again, Kilkenny can have no real sympathy about it, but Kilkenny again have taken out, we spoke about their first 2 fixtures, they would have been expecting big wins against Westmeath and Laois, and job done really over the first 2 games.
Yeah, exactly. And look, they did rack up a big score. Like, Laois didn't make it easy on Dublin the week before, and you know, Kilkenny did what they had to do, and it was never in doubt. Look, not to be patronising or anything, but it was never in doubt. And Kilkenny, like that, went out and did what they needed to do. James is saying it there. You need to rack up scores. You can't be looking at each game going, sure, look, if we just get the win and 2 points on the board, because looking at the table the way it is, you do have to go out there and rack up the scores. And no more again the same against Galway, against Westmeath. You know, coming off a draw in Wexford Park, it wouldn't have done Galway any good even going out and winning this game by 4 or 5 points, if I'm honest, or 6 points, or having a real cagey match and just coming out of Clare Stadium. They needed to go out and just go, right, we'll just keep the scoreboard moving till the 70th minute, and whatever the score is, happy days. Kilkenny very much did the same thing. Even the likes of Tom Phelan coming back from injury, getting a goal. They just had lads kind of popping up all over the place, and like 18 wides, okay, Brian will be telling them to improve on that, but at least it just showed that not only were they racking it up on the scoreboard, but they were still creating chances, they were hitting wide, and it gives them something to focus on as well. But like Kilkenny have no doubt over what they have to do over the next while. They've their 3 hardest games coming now. Still have 4 points on the board, but they're in a really good position. You know, injury wise, they haven't many injuries at the moment. They've learned a lot from the league as well, so they are in a good position. But look, unfortunately for Laois as well, you know, Laois would have liked to put up more of a battle. They do have their injury concerns as well, and they do have their injuries where they can't actually pick lads. But it's not a favourable position for Laois to be in, and unfortunately they're going to kind of shift these. They don't have the leeway really to be losing players without shipping these big defeats anyway. But look, it was a big win for Kilkenny, and certainly look, nothing to be taken away from Laois from this match.
Yeah, might come down when it comes to that last game in Port Laois between Laois and Westmeath, which is like a de facto relegation final when you consider that Joe McDonagh is probably not going to be won by Kerry this season. That it could be down to who has the fittest panel, because Tommy Doyle got injured for Westmeath at the weekend against Galway. We'll see if he's fit to play against Dublin this coming weekend. Just a couple of things I mentioned in those games too, like Cillian Doyle again has just been so free scoring, scored 14 points against Galway at the weekend in that defeat. Galway had some big scores as well, like Conor Cooney 1-8, Joseph Cooney scoring 1 goal and 5. A huge score with 337. TJ Reid back in, his first championship start of the year, 110 for Kilkenny at the weekend, so nice to be able to ease him back into what's a huge bank holiday meeting between your 2 counties, lads. Taggy Fogarty.
We'll ease him back in, won't we? We'll ease him back in now this week.
Well, there you go, James. So I'm going to give you first shout on something that Taggy Fogarty was talking about on OTB AM this morning. He was making the argument, I don't know whether this was him talking down Brian Cody going on to take his apprentice on at the weekend. He says Kilkenny have beaten nothing so far this year because of the way that the group worked out in Division 1B, and he's arguing they've beaten 2 soft teams starting the championship, that we don't really know where Kilkenny are at because they haven't played one of the top teams who are really on it. And his qualification for that was that Waterford were already through to the league semi-finals before they played them.
Oh, typical. That's typical now. Like,
is that just cute tourism in Yarra, is it?
If I'm in the guard dressing room, I know what's coming down the road. I'll put it that way, up the road, should I say. I know exactly what's coming. And you have to meet fire with fire, I'll put it that way to you. So I'm expecting a big clash, like a huge big clash. Like Kilkenny, yeah, you can say they've played nothing. Again, that the 2 games they've played have been not very challenging. But you know they're going to come with a ferocious work rate. You know they've got a good balance of a team and a good squad now at this stage, assembled between young and old. So there's going to be nothing light there whatsoever. If I'm calling the game, I'm tossing a coin, and I genuinely am picking heart and head over anything else, because the margins are so small when you put 2 teams of this together. But I'm looking at it and thinking, I'm saying Galway are going to have enough. I'm saying that the home crowd there's going to be a big crowd expected. I think the weather, which is always a big issue in Pearse Stadium, is supposed to be fairly okay. We're not going to have flipping a gale force breeze like you always do. So you'd expect it to be fairly neutral conditions, if you like, with a good home crowd. And look, I think that the last day for Galway, it was important to get that win, get a run into some lads, get some scoring going to them, get a bit of confidence up regardless of opposition. And look, I think Henry, who's better primed to kind of foresee what Kilkenny are bringing to him, Sheffield. You know, their greatest ever player is now over Galway, and he'll fill us in with all their secrets and what they're going to come with. So, look, he's the right man to have in the right spot at the right time. And again, I don't think, granted, he's relatively young in his managerial career. I don't think he's going to get anyway swayed or preoccupied by this fact. It's Cody versus Sheffield, and it's King versus Prince, whatever you want to call it. That's going to be completely irrelevant. I think from looking at him objectively, he's quite methodical. He'll see the job at hand, do exactly what's required, and hope for victory. A big performance first of all, then hope for victory after that. So I'm going to call it by Galway by 2.
Right, before we get the Kilkenny jury on this scale, let us in on the inside track on what the crack is with Conor Whelan's fitness then, because Shefflin was very non-committal when he was asked about the weekend. Have to assess it during the week, we're not quite sure, thought it was a couple of weeks, not quite sure if he's going to be back for this week. What's the word around Galway at the moment about his fitness?
The word is, it's a hamstring injury. Like it's semi-serious. Like when I say semi-serious, I'm not talking about 8 to 12 weeks. I'm talking about, let's say, 3 to 4, something like that. That when you consider the round robin championship, you're basically kind of nearly ruling them out. Anything beyond that is somewhat of a minor miracle in terms of improvement, because these injuries, like these hamstrings, like granted I never got a hamstring injury, and if I did there'd be something wrong, but like they're very slow to heal. It's when you go to the 100% max of a sprint or a run that you really feel the pinch after you come back. So it's not like you can race it on like a bone and just play through it. The hamstring it's a very nullifying injury, so he's going to have to come through it. I'd say he'll miss the Kilkenny game, obviously. I think he'll miss the game after, and then hopefully we'll see him after that. You'd be hoping that we see Jason Flynn and we see Whelan and Ronan Glennon come back. I won't say around the same time, but definitely around the latter stages round robin, because the three guys that if we're going to progress, like, we certainly need them. Definitely need them.
Right, Paul, that's a boost straight away. If they're not going to risk his fitness for this weekend, not having to worry about Whelan in and around that full forward line is a boost to Kilkenny.
Definitely, yeah. Right. And I think, it is a fine margin at the moment in terms of what could win this game, because it is a tough one to call now, in fairness. There's a lot to be said. Galway, after the game in Wexford Park, they should have closed out the game, really. Why didn't they is a question, I suppose. Henry Shefflin will be looking to maybe rectify, maybe sort out, listen lads, we need to seal out these games. Certainly up in Pearse Stadium, we haven't got much roar going to Pearse Stadium over the last few years, but the likes of Conor Whelan being out, like Conor Whelan, like, he'll preoccupy the full back full stop. Like, you can't leave Conor Whelan alone, and he's basically, everyone's keeping an eye on him when he's in the full forward line. Since he's not there, does it create a small bit more of a platform for Kilkenny going forward? That might sound mad to say with the full back line, but Hughie Lawler is a very dominant full back, in fairness, and as far as I'm concerned, there's only a few players that would physically dominate Hughie Lawler. Conor Whelan being one of them. Conor Whelan isn't there. Who do you bring in to occupy Hughie Lawler, or do you even try and occupy him? Do you just let the full forward sit in close? So the likes of Conor Whelan being absent, I wouldn't discount it in terms of it being the factor that tips the scales, in fairness. It is a tough one to call, though. Like, the good thing that I do say about the likes of this Kilkenny team, in fairness, is they will relish this challenge. They won't go up and, as far as I'm concerned, have a dead rubber and kind of not perform, or that we're scratching our head on Monday seeing what the story is. If Galway are winning this, they're winning it fair and square, and they're putting in a savage performance. I think Kilkenny, what Brian Cody will be looking at the moment with Kilkenny is, he hasn't really shown his hand, as far as I'm concerned. We've played league matches and played a full league and performed really well. He hasn't had the last two matches where he's had to go out and really show his hand. TJ Reid, as he laughed at me, he didn't start the first game. I knew he wouldn't start the first game, because Brian Cody would be saying, listen, these are the players who've been playing. You'll prove when you get your chance, take your chance. And that would be Brian Cody's attitude towards this, as a case of, listen lads, the jerseys are up for grabs. Now, he introduced them very quickly up in Westmeath, and now he started last day. So Brian Cody's attitude at the moment will be that, a lot of players will be looking at this game saying, if I'm starting this game, brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but I need to perform really well, because I want to be playing the next game, and I want to play, and they know that that's the way Brian will work. That, if I give you a chance this weekend, you need to perform. There is no second chances. So whatever team Brian puts out the weekend, I do believe they're going to throw a lot at Galway. I think Galway do have the firepower to go and win the match. I find my loyalties towards Kilkenny saying Kilkenny are going to win it. But I think the platform is there for Galway. Galway are very good in Pearse Stadium, and they don't allow many teams to come and turn them over, let's say championship wise. We'll let the league aside. So it is a hard one to call. The likes of Conor Whelan not being there is a big factor now, in fairness. But the other side of it is, I don't think Henry Shefflin will play him the weekend, even if he's 80-90% fit, because it's too risky. There's no need to do it. There's no need to make an injury that's a small injury now and he'll be back in a few weeks. There's no point in dragging that injury out even longer to a player that's so influential and so important to your team. So I think at the weekend, regardless of what Henry's saying, I don't think we'll see Conor Whelan playing. I think that'll allow Kilkenny to really, I suppose, be a little bit more steady at the back. I don't think Galway will win as many ball in the full forward line, because you haven't got Conor Whelan causing problems there. So that might just be the difference that allows Kilkenny to win the more percentages of ball in that back line and maybe push forward. But who will win, I suppose, and I talk with my heart to say maybe Kilkenny. I'll go against Taggy there saying Kilkenny, but I just think that Kilkenny, look, they've 4 points on the board. We have lads fighting for positions. I think they're in a good position to go and mount a serious challenge on Galway, but I don't know, it's a very tough one to call. If I was to be unloyal to my Kilkenny lads, my head might be saying Galway at the moment, just because it's a home venue and maybe, I don't think the whole Henry Bryan thing, that doesn't come into it as far as I'm concerned. No, and Henry, it doesn't come into it. Henry's there as Galway manager. He's not there as this sentimental thing of used to hurl for Kilkenny. But I think we know what the picture on every paper on Monday morning is going to be anyways. Henry and Bryan shaking hands on the sideline. That'll be the hurling cover photo anyway. But that won't come into it for Henry anyway. It'll be very much, he's there as the Galway manager. He's there for his team to get 2 points on the board, a home victory. So I think that'll be the angle with him. There'll be none of this crack of coming up against Bryan or coming up against Kilkenny. He's there as Galway manager.
Yeah, I think that's a side story for the rest of us all to talk about. Naturally, there'll be, how close were these two guys when Shefflin was playing under him? And, there'll always be that thing as well, that there were plenty of reports that Cody was interested in getting Shefflin as part of the Kilkenny management team, but Shefflin's decided to go off and learn his own way. I would imagine, Paul, that Brian Cody will be, I would say quite proud of the fact that Henry Shefflin's gone off and taken on a pretty big job here with Galway too, because the easier thing to do would have been to come in and be part of the management team within Kilkenny, but he's gone and put his head in the block by becoming a manager in his own right here. Yeah,
it's a funny one. I understand what you're saying by him maybe being proud, but I don't think Brian really minds or.
Well, not that it'll matter this Sunday afternoon. This Sunday afternoon for both of them.
No, yeah.
2 points on the table.
But in general, as a point in general, Henry's gone off to Galway. I think Brian, look, you'll be happy for Henry, but I don't think Brian cares, to be honest, where his ex-players might be or might be managing. But look, Henry's been, I suppose, maybe took a real steady step in managing Ballyhale to a Club All-Ireland, which obviously had a good Ballyhale team, stuck close to home. Not easy to do it with your home team, and went and did it. And then he went with Thomastown Intermediate, who were a really good team in Kilkenny. If they got up to senior, they would get victories up at senior. They're a very strong team. But it's a bold move out of Henry, because a lot of lads could say you could go off and pick other jobs that'd be easier and maybe less out of the spotlight and find your feet. But in fairness to Henry, he's an ambitious man. He's his own man, and he went up and took on a job that is open to a lot of scrutiny. Okay, we're in the honeymoon period at the moment, and lads will be patting on the back, and we're delighted to have you. But at the same time, it's a big, important job. Galway people won't tolerate, regardless of your name, they won't tolerate not winning. They won't tolerate someone not putting in good performances. We've seen the Galway team that Henry is putting his own spin on it. We saw him beating Limerick and the work rate. Okay, they stepped away from that, but I suppose there was a few things off the pitch that distracted from Galway as well. Really, I suppose having a 100% league, but look, I think Henry's his own man. Henry wanted to do things his own way, and to be honest, Henry would maybe probably better off if he wants to be an inter-county manager. I mean, he would have learned a lot from his time hurling with Kilkenny. Going back in and managing with Kilkenny, would he have taken a lot more from it? I don't know. That's something for Henry to take. But he's went and he's put his toe in different waters now at the moment between club management, and he's just gone straight to the top with inter-county management in terms of a really savage team. You see other lads maybe taking other jobs throughout the country, but look, it's, in fairness to Henry, he's his own man. I don't think he really takes too much from what other people are thinking or what he should or shouldn't do. And he as well, he has a great backroom team around him as well. So I think Henry knows his own business and knows what he wants to do. And obviously, in some ways, down the road, we'll be looking obviously to go, Jesus, we'd love to have Henry Shefflin involved in Kilkenny hurling down the line. I won't get into any other arguments about where you want managers and stuff, but Henry Shefflin's a great person to have involved in any setup. So it's certainly going to be interesting the weekend. But look, again, like I said, I see it very much of a Henry being a Galway man at the moment, and Brian Cody's out there to get 2 points. He doesn't care that Henry Shefflin's on the sideline.
There you go. Official backing for Brian Cody there from Paul Murphy is the line that we take from the end of that. We also take the word savage team, which are Galway, James, to throw it back over to you. But what we need from this savage Galway team is probably something similar to that Limerick performance, or getting up to points where they hurled really well away from home against Wexford. But a kind of a consistent high-level performance will be required if Galway are going to take the points on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, because consistent across the board from 1 to 20 is non-negotiable, but we also need our big players to produce a big performance. So we need to be very steady at the back. So Ian Murphy there's a big performance. He has to deliver a big performance in terms of his puckouts. We've been a small bit cagey, a bit kind of wishy-washy with our puckouts. So we need to nail that down and make sure that's a good platform for us to retain possession. We need big performances from Daithí and Garrett up to the spine. And you're looking for Cathal to do as much of the playmaking role, if you want to call it that, and going forward role as possible, because the more he ticks, the more Galway tick. And I think if he gets on the ball a lot, he'll warrant an awful lot of attention, obviously. But again, as we spoke about the Keane Lynch, Tony Kelly kind of thing, he'll free up a bit of space for some shooters. So you're hoping that we can produce big performance from him, Joseph Cooney, Conor Cooney. We have to nail our frees. You have to produce brilliant basics against Kilkenny, and that's work rate number one. So that's hit them with everything that you have, every senior you have, because that's exactly what you're going to get off them. So I don't know where we get the same kind of physical encounter that you saw in the Limerick and Waterford, but I'll say we'll come close to it. There'll be an awful lot of hits. I don't think there'll be an awful lot of space allowed to either set of forwards. So you're going to have to be able to take that on board, manage it, and get through it. But consistency is key, like you said. Like if we do get a lead, I hope we get a lead. You need to see it out. We can't be losing leads like we lost against Wexford. That's just not. That can't be in our vocabulary anymore. And you're hoping that we produce something that would be a stepping stone. Not a stepping stone's the wrong word, but it give you a platform to go forward. You know, you're looking for some positivity. Granted, we can take some from the Westmeath game, but you're looking for something to tell us as a Galway supporters that yes, we have a real shot at challenging the Limericks and of this world. So, and by doing so, they have to put up a big challenge against Kilkenny. I love playing Kilkenny because you get a real honest performance. Like, you know exactly what's coming up the road to you. Some teams you play against, you might know. We're here talking about Cork and Clare. You might know what you get off them, but when Kilkenny come up the road, you know exactly what's coming, and it's up to you to take it. Like, if we play well, you know, if we play really well and we're beaten, I can take that. I can put my hand up and say fair enough, right? But if we don't play well or don't perform and we're beaten, I can't take that shit, you know. So if we produce an honest performance and play well, then whatever way the result goes, we'll take it from there.
Well, if you don't get a result, you'll have to win at Parnell Park. And remember the last time the Galway had to go to Parnell in a knockout game. Sorry to have to remind you about that.
Sorry.
Well, look, it was Crow Park last year. I mean, Dublin were able to beat Galway there.
Burn that place, yeah.
Just stay out of the city appears to be the message here. So the games, like this Sunday afternoon, it's tasty. You've got the Leinster Senior Hurling Championship round 3 meeting of Galway and Kilkenny in Salt Hill, 2 p.m. That game's an RTE2. Then you've got a 2:30 start for Laois against Wexford at O'Moore Park. Half an hour later, Westmeath against Dublin in TEG Cusack Park. And it's on GA Go at 2 p.m, Cork against Clare, because football's on the telly at 4 o'clock from the Ulster football. But they are good fixtures this weekend. Just one game in Munster, but again, a big weekend in Leinster with 3 fixtures. Brings us around nicely to listener questions. So let's have a look at some that came in over the last 24 hours. We've been throwing these up on Instagram just to see what you guys want answered from Skehill and Murphy each week. This one is coming from Cian Craiga, a Limerick fan by the looks of it, based on their crest. So the question here, I'll throw it to you first, Paul. Will Lynch's injury now trouble Limerick, or is the system so effective that it shouldn't matter?
Yeah, I think the system is so effective that it shouldn't matter. And I think we got our answer straight away the weekend. Cathal O'Neill came on, stuck a ball over the bar, and no problem at all. And John Kiley has his lads on the bench. Like Cian Lynch, everybody wants him playing every week, no doubt about it. And regardless what team in the country is playing, if you're picking it, Cian Lynch is on the team, there's no doubt. Cian Lynch is gone now. Their system is still strong enough for them to put in someone else. So and I think we pretty much got our answer straight away. You know, it wasn't a case Cian Lynch went off the pitch you know, in the 70th minute or the 65th minute. They played the majority of the game without him, and Cathal O'Neill came on and saw his opportunity, and he had a few wides but got a good few scores. So I think the system is too strong at the moment in Limerick for one player. We've seen them, they're without a few players at the moment, and they're still performing really well. So no, I think, look, obviously everybody wants to see Cian Lynch on the pitch, but at the moment that he's missing, I don't think it knocks the funk out of Limerick at all. I think the system is far too strong, and they have too many players to replace him.
James, that was kind of your feeling last week, was that Limerick can lose people in key positions, they can move around. We spoke about the fact that even they had, you know, moved Kyle Hayes back into the forward line, and they were able to just, you know, switch and pivot things around, and Limerick keep rocking. Is that the biggest benefit of the system that they've built up over the last 4 years, so that genuinely few teams could lose a player of the quality of Cian Lynch but still perform the way they did last weekend?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Like, you have to understand that Limerick also have top class hurlers. So like we can take 15 junior C hurlers and put them into the Limerick system and they're not produce shit. You know, it's like they still have top class hurlers. Like, when you have people have the ability, and I'll reference the same people over and over again. Kyle Hayes, for him to be able to go from centre forward to wing back to full forward and so on, and produce all-star performances. And the same with, I fully believe if you put Dessie Burns centre forward, he'd still do as good a job as what he does at wing back. And it's just that they have top quality players put into a system where they can thrive. So like, they've got a management group that have put this system in place, trained them to the system, and then they just execute it. And like, there was, you know, it's hard to pick a hole in them. You know, so like, if players go down with injuries and multiple injuries, grand, you say that obviously the level of performance will drop. That's natural. Like, but for us to expect them to drop off hugely because they miss a player or two at this moment in time, it's not going to happen. You know, I myself thought a couple of months ago, geez, would they drop, let's say if they lost what they've lost so far, would they drop 20%? And I was kind of toying with the fact maybe they would, but that's been answered. That's been answered now over the course of the weekend. So I think the system, they're both they're duly beneficial. The players execute the system perfectly, and the system allows the player to execute perfectly.
Paul, question in from Brian Rossiter. Will Waterford have learned anything from eventually being out-muscled by Limerick? So I suppose the point there being that they were eventually just kind of out-fought a little bit in that second half by Limerick. Is there a learning there for Cahill and the management team after what they experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. They would have looked at the good start they got, and they got a few scores on the board. I think they would have looked certainly at the likes of Caleb Lyons running forward and kind of free running at the Limerick defence. I mean, he was shut down a few times, and as were lots of Waterford players, they ran into this cul-de-sac. But there was a few times there where Caleb Lyons, let's say for example, got a few balls and he found the space and he managed to go at Limerick. Again, for the goals, like let's say particularly for the Pendergrass goal as well, like that was really incisive and it had to be perfect. The pass from Bennett was perfect, the men running off the shoulder. It was a really well earned goal. So there is things to take from, but some of the negatives are things that will be the positives going forward, like where they'll basically just go, we're out muscled. That's something we need to improve on. Physically they competed with them for the majority of the game, but Limerick were just dominant enough to push them away and create the distance. I think something big time they'll have to learn from is in 2 games now they've seen Tadhg de Burca be kind of nullified in lots of ways. And Tipperary nullified him to a certain extent. Kilkenny did it again in the league as well in Nolan Park, where they just had this player playing a little bit out further and kind of not playing exactly the way it suited Waterford. Now Tadhg de Burca got on a good few balls. That's Tadhg de Burca. That's because he's a very good player and he knows how to find those areas to get on the balls. But at the same time, he wasn't as influential. And if you look at the likes of Declan Hannon at centre back with Limerick, Declan Hannon just goes about his business. We're never sitting here talking about him every week saying that he's this exceptional player and only for Declan Hannon the game is won. But Declan Hannon gets on a lot of ball and is very effective even going forward as well. So I think that's something Waterford will be looking at going, maybe we need to get Tadhg de Burca going forward a little bit more up through the middle. Maybe we need to, be a bit more dominant. And something Liam Cahill also talked about was just the decision making. It was one thing he mentioned after the game where that he's not taking it for granted that Limerick can just dominate them. He's saying, well, there's definitely a way we can get around this. So, it is really interesting. Waterford will take positives from it. They'll also take negatives that Liam Cahill will be looking to turn into positives, that places to improve. So there is lots of places that Waterford are still learning and they're still trying to just unlock this Limerick team, and they're not a million miles away, but there is still a gap at the moment.
I can feel the next one, which comes from D. McGurk 29. Are Antrim a good team? Straight answer to that, yes. I mean, they've responded really well after the defeat against Laois. I was a bit concerned about what was going to happen to Antrim once Neil McManus was injured too. I thought, there's that possibility that there would be an overhang from the disappointment of that defeat in Portlaoise. They've bounced back really well. They changed around for the Tipperary game. Took a bit of a defeat, but I think Darren Gleeson knew exactly what he was doing. Wanted to be fresh for the game in Navan for the relegation playoff. They beat Offaly. They're playing Division 1 hurling next year. They then ground out a result against Offaly in the first round of the Joe McDonagh Cup a couple of weeks ago, and then did some unmerciful scoring against their neighbours Down last weekend in Ballycran. 6 goals and 22 points was remarkable last Sunday, and they are now in a very strong position to qualify because Down have already beaten Kerry. Antrim already have beaten Offaly and will have head-to-head over Offaly. You would think that Kerry is probably the most difficult game that Antrim now have left, but Antrim have already pretty much got a foot in the Joe McDonagh Cup final. So I would have thought for the Saffrons start of the year, if Darren Gleeson was putting down 2 targets on the board, it would have been stay in Division 1, get to the Joe McDonagh Cup final. They've stayed in Division 1 and there's a very good chance they're going to get to the McDonagh Cup final. They look to me the strongest team outside of those who are playing in the top 2 divisions. And I think that definitely qualifies you as a good team. So Antrim going really, really well. Very impressive first 2 weeks for them. There's a goalkeeper on this one, James. So I'll give you the question because of the fact the avatar is a goalkeeper taking a puck out. It's Evan Ahern. He's talking about Cork. He says, would you move Mark Coleman to midfield and Tim O'Mahony to 11? We spoke earlier about Cork maybe changing system. Is there an argument to free Coleman up, take his defensive responsibilities away, let him be a creator 10-15 yards further forward?
There's certainly an argument for it. Is it the right move to move him to midfield? I'm not so sure. I would see Coleman as more of a flank player nowadays. Like take him out of a real heavy work zone. I'd have him more of a wing back type area where he can kind of roll up a flank and go forward with at will. O'Mahony to 11. I don't know. I've seen videos of him before playing for Newtown Shandrum. Was Newtown? Is that his club? Newtown Shandrum, isn't it? Playing him at 14. Like, so he's played in the forwards before, and he's quite efficient when he goes forward. Actually, in terms of scoring and creating opportunities. So it's not that he can't play there, but just is he well suited there for Cork? I don't know that suits him perfectly. Like, look, the 11 today is very much a creator first kind of. The old workhorse 11 is gone. The old, John Power sort of. Mark Curran's Joe Rabbit type thing. Them days are long gone. Your 11 is kind of very, very much an access player who creates a lot for you. I don't know if Timmy Mahoney suited to that kind of role. Maybe Mahoney to midfield would be a better shout than the 11. Seamus Harnedy for me is Cork's 11. I don't know why he doesn't start every day. There's obviously different reasons, don't get me wrong. But like what he can produce, low ball, high ball, scoring from distance and tackling, he's their 11. So I'd say Mahoney to midfield, Coleman to probably, I'd put him probably to 7. And then I don't know who we put at number 6. Bring back Brian Corcoran.
There you go. It's the $1 million question, isn't it? And the last question we'll take for today, and you can leave comments for us if you're watching the video on YouTube. By all means, throw a comment underneath or stick in the live chat, and keep an eye on our Instagram. We'll be back recording from Monday of next week with the bank holiday, so we'll be a day earlier now that Murphy's back from his travels. But Murphy gets the last question. It comes from Wee Man Sparky. Thoughts on Wexford and where it's been going wrong?
Yeah, like again, as when we covered Wexford in the Wexford Dublin game, it just seems to be kind of a confidence thing. If I suppose, if I was looking at them for the league, and like they got a lot of praise in the league, from everywhere, that they're really performing really well, and part of me kind of wonders, did that seep in? Did they kind of maybe believe that they had enough on teams to perform, at 80% or so? Like this Wexford team needs to perform at 100% every week to go out. They're not like Limerick, who can maybe go at 80% and still grind out a victory, or a few teams who might be able to manage it. Probably only Limerick at the moment. Maybe Waterford can do that, but it just seems to be that they had a good league. Okay, they finished poorly, but they're after bringing something into the championship that we didn't see during the league. Like their work rate has dropped right off, incredibly defensively, without even laying a hand on the other team, which it completely contradicts itself. We saw so many Dublin players having savage time on the ball the weekend. Paddy Smith would get the ball, and he'd actually be standing at one stage. He stood and picked out a pass, which is criminal at inter-county to have the ability to stand. Show me a player who stood in the Waterford and Limerick game and had a chance to pass away without being absolutely cleaned out of it. Didn't happen. So Wexford just seem to have completely dropped off the pace, their attitude, their work rate. And like I said, it is going to be a tough thing. I don't think there's things that they can really rectify going into the next 2 games, because you nearly need a savage battle. Like Kilkenny and Galway, as James was saying, either way, Kilkenny and Galway are going to take a lot from this weekend. They're going to get a real physical challenge. They're going to get a lot of hurling done. They'll maybe have points to work on and moral victories and all these things. Wexford won't really necessarily have that over the next while. So at the moment, I don't know, Wexford just seem to be drifting. They seem to be drifting at the moment. They had a good league and seem to be not building on that at the moment. So unless Wexford rectify, I suppose really clean the slate now and go back at it, they're really at danger now of just disappearing out of this championship without any sort of I suppose a real stab at it. So yeah, look, Wexford have a lot of questions to answer at the moment, but I think the biggest one is just that, what are we about? Where's our work rate? Where's our attitude? And get this back to square one and just start working for the ball and working for each other and putting in tackles. So I think that's where Wexford are. And yeah, look, they're certainly not in a good position at the moment going forward for them to really reach a Leinster final.
Yeah, well, look, friends of the pod are able to find us, even if it's not on Instagram or on YouTube. No doubt there'll be a DM from somebody over the week. A couple of DMs over the last week just when it comes to housekeeping, wondering if we could stream the video a little bit later in the day on Tuesdays. So not only because of the late recording on Tuesday this week, we're going to probably aim to stream the video out on a Tuesday evening, so you catch it on the Off the Ball YouTube channel. You'll see clips on Off the Ball social throughout the week as well, so you can always go back and watch it on demand. But let us know if that schedule suits you better. A lot of people were saying middle of the day was impossible when they were in work, so they ended up catching demand. So if they want to see the premiere later in the day, we're hoping from next week to get our podcast back out at 7 o'clock on a Monday. Best place to subscribe, really, OTB GA stream, wherever you get your podcast from. And also we've got the Hurling Pod stream, which is there too, which both will be updated simultaneously. So if you want to follow either, help us out, give us a rating, give us any comments or reviews that you might have on wherever you're picking up your podcast. It helps the podcast to grow. And also stick those comments onto the YouTube. We love the bad ones especially, and that actually manages to help the videos out as well. Well, we do. This is the thing, the WhatsApp group, every week I always screenshot the really bad ones and go, Hey, Skehill, look at what this guy said about you, and you generally have a laugh about it. So I think we're all fairly thick-skinned about all this as well. So
To be honest, Skehill, sure, you were telling me one of the days you have a few different profiles on like YouTube and this where you put up bad comments about yourself, and then you throw in the odd bad one about me, let's say, and that's kind of how you operate, isn't it?
Yeah. And I forgot to mention there as well that whoever wins the Hurling Pod Fantasy, the prize is a free day's labour from Paul Murphy. So I have that good authority.
That doesn't exist. That does not exist.
There was
work for the state. Yeah, there's no labour.
I was out to get corporate sponsorship to try and get a surprise. No, you've got a slave for the day is what you get if win. It's going to be good luck catching Dermot McGill the way he's started in the first 2 weeks. If you want to play fancy hurling, just flick back through the video again. You'll see in the timestamps where we spoke about the fancy hurling. The code is up there for our league. Join and come and beat all of us, even though we're doing a little bit better than we thought at the start. That is episode 10 of the Hurling Pod in the pocket. Skehill, Murphy, looking forward to talking to you again next week.
Sound lads.
God bless.